Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education for the Appleton Area School District. My name is Kay Eggert, and I'm serving as the board president. And first, roll call of fellow board members: James Bacon, Edward Ruffalo,
Here.
Christine Sauter,
Here.
Jason Kolpak,
Here.
Nick Ross,
Here.
Peng Tao.
Here.
Okay, please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As a reminder for anyone who may be viewing this meeting remotely, the materials for the meeting can be found on board docs, which can be linked to through the district website. I will ask if board members have any requests to remove any of the consent agenda items for separate consideration tonight. Seeing none, then could I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We are going to then continue on with our agenda. We have a couple of special presentations. First, welcome to Aubrey from West High School. And Aubrey, who's our student school board representative, will have a short report for us. So welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you. Well, hello, it's great to see everyone again. Happy 2025. I'm so excited to get this year started to experience new opportunities. I think I have a presentation ready. Okay, awesome. First, I would like to start where we left off, which was close to holiday break. To kick off the holiday spirit, Appleton had the annual holiday parade, which our West Band played in and our cheer team marched in. Throughout the week, we had different spirit days, including Pajama Day, Holiday Character Day, Holiday Colors, Festive Socks and Headgear, and Ugly Sweater Day. Unfortunately, I missed the first 4 days, but luckily I was able to be there for Ugly Sweater Day to experience the holiday spirit that filled Appleton West. As West is built in 1938, we have something that most schools don't have, a school wood burning fireplace that's working today. That is something I think really adds to our school's authenticity, filling the building with holiday spirit and pride. The most recent surprise for West was last week as 10 Australians came to visit, shadowing students, teaching cricket, presenting about Australia, and more. These 10 Australians come from Boys Brigade, which is a Christian organization similar to Boy Scouts based in Perth, Australia. On Monday during homeroom, we got a surprise announcement from Jordan Lunn, the leader of the Boys Brigade, telling us what the boys were going to be doing throughout the week. On Tuesday and Wednesday, they were each set up with a student leader who they shadowed around through classes in order to learn what it's like during a school day at Appleton West. On Thursday, the Aussies taught gym class how to play cricket, the national sport of Australia. Lastly, on Friday, they presented during Flex to staff and students about Australia, keeping us engaged with games, candy, an Australian spelling bee, and the majorly feared Vegemite. We are grateful that the group came to Appleton, Wisconsin, but we are most proud they chose to visit West, giving our school the opportunity to show why we have so much terror pride. Not only did the Australians have fun, but so did many of our students, as I know so many people who are now very good friends with the group of guys who will be sure to stay in touch. While we don't have a cricket team at Appleton West, we do have many sports teams that have started their winter season, including girls and boys basketball, wrestling, swim and dive, hockey, powerlifting, dance, and cheer. Last Tuesday, we had a boys and girls basketball doubleheader versus Appleton East with the theme of Pink Night. This Ballin' for a Cure theme not only brought awareness to cancer, but it also raised money to benefit cancer research. Our wrestling team has stayed busy with competitions, most recently at the Dave Cohen Classic in Fond du Lac, taking first place as a whole team. 4 varsity wrestlers were top finishers: Ben Hilbert, Salah, Charlie Blevins, and Javante Johnson. Not only is our boys team doing well, but so is our girls team, as we have one of the biggest girls wrestling teams in the area. Swim and dive is also currently in season, combining the Appleton West and Kimberly teams. Our team competed in swim sectionals in November, and two teammates, Callie, who is a swimmer, and Luciana, who is a diver, qualified for state. We also have our combined Appleton United hockey teams, which is a combination of Appleton West, North, and East to create both a boys and girls hockey team for the Valley. Recently, we have created a powerlifting team, which is dedicated to strength training and competing. Just on Saturday, Madison Millhop and Lydia Berry both qualified for state, taking first and second place at the Winneconne meet. Our dance team recently had an amazing time at the Kaukauna Dance Classic, proud of putting their all into their routines. Lastly, our cheer team took home the trophy at the Appleton North's Lightning Bolt Explosion as their second time taking first place this season. They're hoping to make it a third time on January 19th at It's Showtime. Something new that I personally am so excited about is the added dance for this year, which is our spring dance. As of now, we are planning on having it on March 15th, the week before spring break. This dance is planned to be put together with the help of Mr. Chudikoff, Student Council, and DECA, giving all the grade levels another opportunity for a high school dance. This is planned to be only students from Appleton West and to be inside with a DJ. For now, this is the extent that I know about the dance, but hopefully at the next meeting, I will have some more information when the clubs get further in the planning process. Before Thanksgiving break on November 22nd, we had our first semester play, Radium Girls, which is based on a story about the miracle cure of radium. Our theater production has begun decisions about our spring musical, which will be Something Rotten, a comedy about Shakespeare stealing the spotlight. The auditions will begin next week with vocal auditions on the 21st and 22nd, and the dance auditions on the 23rd. Also before Thanksgiving break, we proudly had our NHS induction ceremony led by advisor Mrs. Vanderloop and President Gwyneth Conkle. This ceremony not only brings together students of excellence, but honors juniors who have shown exceptional scholarship, leadership, service, and character. As well as honoring juniors through NHS, Mr. Chudikoff also encourages students to look forward to Student of the Month. This award was presented to 10 students who showed notable merit and initiative throughout each month. In December, a program from UW-Oshkosh came to present on their UWO pre-college program to Miss Luke's EL classes. This program is a great option for students, giving them the opportunity to visit during the summer to get the college experience. This would include living in dorms, going on field trips, and attending classes. Thanks to UW-Oshkosh, this program is fully financially supported for any students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Last Monday, West also had a great opportunity for incoming freshmen and current freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, our annual Explore Night, which was incredibly put together by our associate principal, Mrs. Diedrichson. Explore Night presents different options for all students planning to attend Appleton West next school year, allowing students to experience the West culture and original opportunities, something that we take great pride in. Throughout our school, we proudly had 15 students to qualify for the AP Scholar with distinction, which required an average of a 3.5 score out of the AP point scale on 5 or more of their AP tests. We also had 20 students qualify for the AP Scholar with honor, which needed an average of a 3.25 on 4 or more of their AP tests, and also 30 students who qualified for the AP Scholar Award, requiring an average of a 3 on 3 or more of their AP tests. Lastly, we had a major shout out to one of our top senior students, Gwyneth Conkle, who was interviewed by Spectrum News to receive the scholarship athlete scholarship. Gwen is a 4.0 senior at Appleton West who is involved in not only clubs, but also 3 sports. Spectrum News made sure to highlight the incredible devotion and dedication Gwen has towards West. I've linked an article and the video in my presentation if anyone would like to go back and visit it later. Not only does West take academics seriously, but also our different organizations and clubs that make students feel at home. Coming up, we have many different ski and snowboard field trips going to different resorts in Upper Michigan. These upcoming trips are on January 25th, February 8th, and February 22nd, all on Saturdays, so students don't have to worry about missing school. We also had an amazing opportunity to go to Pickleball Kingdom during their soft opening through a Pickleball Club. This field trip was a great experience to not only see a new business in our community, but also play and learn more about the game of pickleball. We are hoping to be able to do this again in second semester to open the opportunity up to more students. DECA recently competed in mini districts on January 4th and had 3 students qualify for state through districts and a total of 10 DECA members who will be going to state. With the second semester coming up, this week is a busy week in order to get ready for everything to finish out our first semester. On Wednesday, we have our first finals day with periods 1 through 4, and then on Thursday, our 5 through 8 periods. We also have an hour and 15-minute period at the end of the day to provide students with time to do makeups or retakes. With the busy week, I think all students are excited to have Friday off in order to get ready for the next semester. Lastly, I wanted to go through some requests and recommendations that either me or other students have with the purpose of representing the student body of Appleton West. I have a friend and know many other students that have to be gluten-free either due to an allergy or a preference, but don't have many options at school. As school is where students are for 9 months out of the year, we believe there should be more gluten-free options in our cafeteria, breakfast, and lunch choices. This could be as simple as swapping some foods out in the cafeteria, which wouldn't have to be drastic, but would allow for students that follow a gluten-free diet to feel more comfortable and seen through the school district. Something else that me and my classmates wish to vouch for is block scheduling. I know this is something I wouldn't see through my year, but going through many AP and rigorous classes, I've noticed that there isn't enough time to get through certain things like labs, lessons, and assessments. Having block scheduling would provide more time for each class period in order to get through lessons and give more students more time to apply the lesson to practices and assignments. Many school districts around the area incorporate block scheduling into their day, like Neenah, Kimberly, and Fox Valley Lutheran. I included Neenah's schedule to provide an example of block scheduling in the area. They have 2 different days, which would be very similar to our final schedule this week, having 4 class periods per day, also including 30-minute lunches. This type of schedule would allow for staff to get the curriculum in with more time for students to practice and understand the material. Thank you so much for your time and listening to why West is best. Does anyone have any questions?
A great report. There's a lot
Thank
going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you brought your thoughts forward to the food Chartwells regarding the gluten-free?
I have not brought it to them. Me and Mr. Chudikoff actually just had a conversation today about it. And we're looking to kind of get into that and get some more options for them as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Hernandez is in the room, of course, and so he heard your request about block scheduling. So that was timely. No, I'm just, no promises. But,
Yeah.
anyways, anything else? Thank you, and good luck on your finals, and then look forward to second semester.
Thank you.
Can't believe it's first semester. Oh, before you leave, yes, another task we have that we would like you to do has been explained to you, that in that basket in front of you, there are some names. There are 3 individuals running for school board in the April election for two places. And so in the basket, if you could draw out one at a time, and then this will determine the order of the individuals that they will appear on the ballot.
Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, you can mix them up. You can do whatever.
Okay.
No pressure.
Okay.
Okay.
Pang Tao. Oliver Zorno. And Christina Kodner.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
your
very
help
much
with
for your
that.
time. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Moving on with our next special presentation, we have the presentation of the 2023-24 annual financial audit. Holly Burr is here, and I will let you introduce our guest.
Good evening, and again, as in previous years, we have with us tonight our lead auditor, Leah Lazecki, with Clifton Larson Ellen, and I will let her take it over.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for asking me to be here tonight. I see lots of familiar faces, so you're probably going to hear a lot of the same things that what you had heard actually 2 years ago, because I wasn't able to be here last year, but I still see a lot of the same familiar faces. So what we're going to do tonight is each of you should have in front of you slides. Okay, and we're going to focus on those slides. In addition, it looks like everybody has the bound audit book and the executive summary. Okay. The slides are in a little bit easier format. However, they're basically all the same information that's in that executive summary that was stuck in the back of the book. Okay. So the objective tonight for me is really just to go through our audit results, answer any questions that you may have, those types of things. Okay. So I'm hoping to steal about 10 or 15 minutes of your time. Okay. So let's start real quick on the agenda. So if you can turn in your slides to page 1, it's actually page 2 on the slides. Okay, so we're going to real quick go through that executive summary. I'm going to talk about services that we provide to the district, those audit results, some basic required communications. I'm going to very quickly talk about the NDNA and some financial trends. And then we're also going to briefly just talk about a new WASB that's going to be effective for next year. Okay. So starting real quick with the services that are provided to the district. Okay. So one thing that I'm hoping that most of you are aware of, but I'm going to talk on anyways, is just so that you have a really good understanding, is that when we come in as auditors, we're actually preparing 2 separate audits. Okay. They're all in the same book, but our focus is really individually on 2 separate audits. Okay. We have the main audit of the financial statements, and then we also do an audit for federal and state monies as well. Okay. Those are 2 separate reports. They have completely separate objectives. Okay. The compliance part that we do, some of it's financial related, but a lot of it is stuff that's not. It's eligibility and it's more stuff that's not necessarily accounting wise. Okay. So we do those 2 separate audits for the district. And then we also do an examination of the district's DPI aid certification that's submitted to DPI every year. Okay. So those are the 3 services that we provided this last year to the district. And before I move on real quick, I just want to give a huge thank you to Holly and to her team. Those services that are provided, I just literally went through them in 2 seconds, but how much time do you put into the audit every year? So I just want to thank Holly and Diane specifically for the amount of time that they put in during the audit, because it really is for us when we come on site, it's a seamless process. Okay, we're able to hit the ground running as we appreciate as auditors. We're not doing like bookkeeping or anything like that we might do with some of our other smaller clients. So we definitely appreciate Holly and her team and all the work that they do ahead of time for us. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's turn real quick to the audit results slide. So as I had explained, there are 2 separate audits. First, the financial statement audit, we gave you what we call a clean audit opinion. Okay. That is the best audit opinion that you can receive from an auditor. Okay. It basically means that we don't believe that your financial statements are materially misstated. Okay. It's not saying that we've audited every single dollar. We can't possibly do that as auditors. But it is the highest level of assurance that you can receive as a district. Okay. The second section talks about internal control deficiencies that we identified through the audit process. Okay. So one of the things that we do as auditors that's really important is understanding your internal controls. Okay. We understand internal controls as they relate to your everyday accounting. And then we also understand your internal controls as they relate to compliance. So as an example, eligibility over food service. Obviously, we're looking to make sure that when you have an application that comes in, is somebody entering it correctly? Is somebody approving it correctly so that the child is receiving the correct meal? Okay. So those are all those things that we do to understand whether or not your controls are functioning as intended. Okay. We spend a lot of time doing this. As auditors, how else could we do an audit if we didn't understand those things? Okay. So at the end, when we look at how your internal controls are functioning, if we have anything that we call a deficiency, we have to report that to all of you. Okay. Usually they're called findings. You'll hear auditors always talk about findings. Okay. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk through. Nothing is hugely significant, but I just want to talk through them real quick so that you're aware. Okay. So this first one listed here is finding 2024-01. And this is because we prepare your financial statements. Okay. And we prepare our financial statements for almost all of our clients. I work with very large counties. I work with other large schools. We also prepare their financial statements. Okay. The biggest thing and the reason why it becomes a finding is because technically the financial statements are supposed to be done by the district, okay? You're outsourcing it to us, that's okay, but that's the reason why it becomes a finding, because really truly, we could miss something as your auditors. I don't think we have, but we could, okay? So that's why it rises to that level, okay? Again, it's a cost benefit decision by the district to outsource that to us, okay? And I should mention too, that I work with a lot of different clients. I've never had a regulator question that. So I've never had DPI say, hey, why is the district not preparing the financial statements? Okay, so just know that it's very common, okay? Finding 2024-002 is adjustments to the district's financial records. Okay, this was a material weakness. One of the things that was discovered this year, actually, when you went from your prior actuary to your new actuary, is that the supplemental pension plan hadn't been valued under accounting standards in the past. It has no impact on your books. Okay, there was nothing wrong with your general ledger. It's what we call your district-wide financial statements. That's in your annual financial report. That's once a year. Okay, so it wasn't anything with your books or anything. It just needed to get valued and recorded into your district-wide. Okay, does that make sense? What that is? Okay, so that becomes a material adjustment that we did record, and it becomes a finding. Okay, we had a couple of other ones. There was some capital AP, I think that was missed, that we had to record that, and as well as clean up just some self-funded stuff. Those are things that aren't part of a typical day of accounting. Okay, most of that's done at year end. Okay, otherwise, journal entries that we proposed as auditors were very minimal, very small, a lot of it just minor cleanup type stuff. Most of the journal entries are prepared by the district. Okay, so any questions on that at all? I know that's a little unusual. You haven't seen that before. Okay, good. All right. The bottom bullet is that there were no deficiencies that were identified in internal control over compliance reported. I want to emphasize this again. The internal control over compliance is so important. It ensures that you're complying with your federal and state grants. Okay. It's awesome that you do not have any issues at all. And not even from just a control perspective that we discussed with management. Okay. And we don't have to report. We identified no control issues whatsoever in federal and state awards. Okay. And we audited 4 federal programs and 2 state programs. So that is very good. Okay. All right. Okay. Turning to the next slide. Federal and state single audit compliance findings. Again, so now this isn't going to be internal control. This is going to be straight out compliance findings. You didn't comply with anything or something. Okay. Nothing like that at all in all of our work that we do around compliance. Okay. Turning to the next page, just real quick, we're just going to talk real quick about the federal and the state major programs that we did audit. Again, there were 4 programs that we looked at on the federal side, the child nutrition cluster, so all your food service programs, Title I, ESSER, and the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grants were all the 4 that we audited this year. All federal programs and state programs are cyclical, so usually they're looked at least every 3 years. Okay, so we're not auditing the same ones every single year, typically, unless it's a really large program. Okay, but we try to touch all of your major programs or those larger programs at least every one of every 3 years. Okay. On the state side, we tested equalization aid and school-based mental health services grant as well. Okay. Down below, it just talks a little bit about what the composition of testing was. So we tested 62% of all your federal award dollars, and we tested about 80% of all your state award dollars. Okay. Again, no compliance issues, no internal control over compliance issues as well were noted during that work. Okay. All right. So this next section is required communications. It's real kind of boilerplate type items. They're things that we need to talk through every year. So I'm going to run through some of these things real quick and just hit the high notes, but I'm not going to go into any of it too in depth. This first section here talks about our responsibilities under generally accepted auditing standards. Okay, again, it's that we're performing an audit that's not absolute. We're giving you an opinion. Okay, that's not absolute. The second section is plan, scope, and timing of the audit is important. Everything that we had planned for in the audit as far as the timing and everything else, all those deadlines were met. The AID certification was submitted timely to DPI. The annual report the actual book was submitted to DPI well before the deadline. There was no rushes towards the end either, at least there wasn't on our end. I hope you feel that way too. So overall, everything went very well as far as timing and meeting those deadlines to DPI. This next section just talks about other information and documents containing the audited financial statements. Not going to go through that unless anybody has any questions. Top of the next page, significant accounting policies. Most important thing to understand is that there were no new accounting policies in 23-24. There will be next year because GASB is always very busy coming out with new accounting policy changes. But there was nothing that happened this year. Okay, so you're comparing apples to apples between years. This next section talks about significant accounting estimates. Most of this is going to relate to your district-wide financial statements. So not the district's general ledger per se, but your annual financial report. Okay, there's a lot of estimates that are built into that. And you'll see that ABC list out those that we consider to be significant. They're very large dollar amounts. Your supplemental pension is about $20 million. Okay, we go through those a lot. We do a lot of testing on those. We understand the methodology, make sure that there's no bias, that type of thing from year to year, to make sure that they're accurate. Okay. The next page, sensitive financial statement disclosures. There were none that were particularly sensitive. Management rep letter is yes, that management does sign a representation letter, and that is included in your executive summary in your audit books. This next section, other, is really important. There's some important things in here that I just want to point out real quick. That first bullet, correction to prior year issued financial statements, I briefly talked about that. We did restate your financial statements, or rather the district restated their financial statements, and we gave you an opinion on that. And that was related to that supplemental pension benefit that wasn't valued by your prior actuary. Okay, so that did get corrected. You can read more about that in note 4 to the financial statements. That next bullet talks about no uncorrected misstatements. An uncorrected misstatement, just so you understand what that term means, is what we call trivial as auditors, and it's low. Okay, so if we identify, let's say on a cash reconciliation, let's say that we identify a $35,000 mistake on a cash reconciliation and it doesn't get corrected. That's an uncorrected misstatement that we would have to communicate with all of you. Okay, so we can't say, oh, it's not material, we're just not going to comment on it. It doesn't work that way. We would still have to communicate that to all of you. Okay, so we did not identify anything like that, except for one thing that I just want to point out is the subscription-based IT arrangements. This is again going to be district-wide. It only amounts to about $337,000 that should be recorded as a liability. It's not, because it's more work to try to determine what the value is than the benefit received from actually recording it. Okay, it doesn't mean you haven't budgeted for it. It's in your general ledger. It's just not showing as a long-term liability. Okay, so that's, if that makes sense to everybody, that's the reason why we go through that. It's a lot of money to value something that's rather small. Okay. So the next bullet talks about material misstatements. I already talked about those, and that we did propose a few material misstatements this year that were corrected by management. The next few sections here are really important. There were absolutely no difficulties or no disagreements with management whatsoever. Okay, and that does happen. That does happen where you actually disagree on an accounting standard or an interpretation of a law or something, but we had nothing like that whatsoever that we have to communicate with all of you. Okay. So the next page, if we can move on, I just want to do a quick shameless plug for the MD&A, because Holly spent so much time writing it that I think it's important to understand. The MD&A is management's discussion and analysis. It's the first section of the audit report. If you haven't spent some time reading it, because I don't blame you, I wouldn't read this whole entire thing either if I was a board member, because some of it is really talking almost in Greek. The MD&A is not. Holly's done a fantastic job writing it. Please spend a little bit of time reading it. If you have new board members or new committee members, it's a great section to give them and say, hey, read this. It's really good understanding of the district. Okay. All right. Some financial trends. So there are financial trends that we've written, CLA has, that I want to talk about real quick, and that's to follow next starting on page 11. All right, so just a quick discussion on fund balance. So I say at this first sentence here that fund balance is a key performance indicator for governments. Okay, it's very closely monitored by management. It is an incredibly important amount that should be looked at every single year and ongoing throughout the year by management. Okay, so you are required to report fund balance in various categories. As you can see, they're all listed there. Okay, I'm not gonna read through them. I would assume that most of you probably understand what each category means. Okay, it's important to understand that fund balance does not equal cash. These balances represent assets less liabilities. So if you try to tie it out to a cash account, that's not going to work. Okay. So as of June 30th, 2024, the district has approximately $136 million in fund balance. Okay. That's going to be all your governmental funds. It's everything. So it's Fund 21 that's carrying student activities. That's included in that amount as well. Okay. As well as food service, all those other funds are all included. Okay. Of that amount, $35 million is assigned by management for specific purposes, and 15 million of it is unassigned. Okay. Unassigned is a very important number because unassigned, even though it sounds like 15 million is a lot, that's your cash flow bucket. Okay. That's what gets you through the highs and lows between before aid and grant payments come in. Okay. So every district has to carry some sort of unassigned fund balance of an amount that they determine for themselves to help pay for those cash flow shortages. Okay. And to eliminate essentially short-term borrowing. Okay. The remaining 86 million of that 136 million is all restricted or non-spendable, and for which management has no discretion as to how it's used. Okay. So let's look real quick on the next page at your governmental fund balances. So all the more that this is going to be is this is just a comparison between 2024 to 2023 for each fund. Okay, so I'm just going to run through some bigger changes. Okay. The general fund did experience a decrease of about 12.7 million. Okay, that's that first section shown there. Your assigned went down by about 5.6 million, which is about 14%. And your unassigned fund balance went down by about 6.8% or 31.4%. Okay. A large portion of that, about half of it was budgeted for. Okay. You do recall that you did approve a deficit budget this last year. Okay. There was also some additional self-funded amounts for health that needed to be paid as well out of 23-24 that also contributed to some of that 12.7 million deficit. Okay. Any questions on that at all? No? Okay. The next section, referendum debt service, that went down by about 600,000. That ebbs and flows as debt is repaid. Okay. The following page, special revenue funds. So you have a trust fund for donations that remain the same. You have restricted for trust fund for donations, which went up about 157,000. Food service went down by about 183,000, and community service basically stayed the same at about with a change of only about 3,300. Okay. Your capital projects funds, it's hard to compare apples to apples in capital projects. Obviously, there's a huge decline in capital projects fund balance this year as you're continuing to spend those referendum dollars. Okay, so total capital projects did see a decline in fund balance of about $26 million. Okay, any questions on any of that? No? Okay. My last thing to comment on real quick is going to be on this next page. And this is really important again. So this is going to be looking at whether or not you have sufficient general fund balance comparatively to benchmarks. Okay, so I'm not saying that this is necessarily perfect for, Appleton. I'm not saying, that at all. I'm just saying that this is a benchmark. Okay, so benchmarks will tell you that an unassigned plus an unassigned fund balance of approximately 20 to 25% of next year's or this year's, I guess it depends on it, an average operating expenditures of your general and your special education funds, okay, is sufficient enough for cash flow purposes, okay? And right now you are falling right within that range, okay? That calculation comes out to between about 48 million and 59 million, and you're sitting right now at about 50 million. So you're right within that 20 to 25% that benchmark would recommend, okay? Again, for cash flow and having to alleviate future short-term borrowing. Okay. All right. And my very last thing, I promised, page 16. That's just going to be an accounting standard update that's going to be coming this next year on compensated absences. Again, this is only going to impact that district-wide financial statement and it won't impact your books per se, but it is something that the district will have to comply with. We will work with Holly and her team on the applicability of that standard this next year. Okay. And that's it. So does anybody have any questions for me at all? Or Holly, do you have anything you want to
Hi,
comment?
just that, and this isn't a question, just, this is my first time being presented to by you, and it was the most engaging auditing presentation I've ever seen. So, thank you
Wow,
very
thank
much,
you.
and also kudos to, Director Burr and Diane for, charming our auditors.
I wouldn't go that far.
Playing nice. How about that?
That might be considered
Yes, yes.
unethical. We probably, we want,
I used the wrong word for
there we go.
working extremely well with our auditors.
So Lee, just to summarize then, as we look at budgets for next year, we really can reasonably afford a $2 million deficit to come out of the general fund balance before that then gets us below that 20%.
Okay, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes, I would agree with that. Mhm.
So if we should happen to fall below that, I know it depends on how far below we fall, but then that's where we start seeing challenges with cash flow, and then do short-term borrowing, cover cash.
Right, right.
In your opinion, if you can share this, that's the recommendation. What's minimum? Is minimum 15%? What are you telling your clients as to, here's a number you just absolutely should not drop below?
I'd be very nervous for. Because I think that then if you're in that boat, most districts are gonna end up having to short-term borrow, which is very expensive. So, and then it just doesn't make sense from a cash flow perspective to be spending that amount of money on short-term borrowing. So I would say 10%.
Thank you very much.
Yep, yep. I will say too, that it definitely depends on, I've had a few districts that have changed these last few years and have actually upped their thresholds because they have aging buildings and they're looking out going, man, that's not enough. We're actually lacking strategy now on some of, on our unassigned fund balance. So they've been increasing that as well. So you have to look at it as a whole, even though you haven't assigned some of those dollars, maybe they're coming down the road. And so you want to keep them in unassigned. Okay. So if that helps.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay.
Okay, we will move on to public input. We do have some individuals who have signed up to speak tonight. And I believe some of these individuals have done this before, but bear with me because I have to go through my standard guidelines and just requests prior to public input. So before we hear from you, there are a few reminders I want to share, and these are highlights from Board Policy 187. Individuals may speak for up to 3 minutes. An individual speaking on behalf of a group, and if the group is here, may speak to 5. I don't see anyone would fall in that category. We will have a timer going so that you can keep track of your allotted time. Please know that any comments exceeding the allotted time may be submitted to the board in writing. The board respectfully requests that speakers refrain from presenting comments that introduce complaints or concerns that are directed toward or identify individual staff members or individual students. As such, personnel-related and student-related matters implicate a variety of rights that require careful attention. The district has established alternative procedures for appropriately addressing such complaints. If that is the case that you have a specific complaint, best to contact the Office of the Superintendent for information on how to proceed with that. A reminder that speaker retains all liability for his or her comments and conduct. And we just ask that comments are respectful and refrain from any threatening or defamatory language. The Wisconsin Open Meetings Law allows only brief discussion of topics that are not listed on the agenda, and therefore we may not be able to fully address comments that are shared tonight. Okay, with that, first, Oliver Zorno.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to address the board. My name is Oliver Zorno, and tonight I speak as an Edison dad and as a neighbor in the historic Central neighborhood. My views are my own and don't necessarily reflect the views of any organizations with which I may be associated. Decisions like tonight's are serious decisions reserved exclusively for the board because of their long-term and wide-ranging impacts. The immediate communities affected by this decision tonight are staunch supporters of the district. The affected area of our community constitutes about 5% of our elementary school students. Yet the same area accounts for 15% of all yes votes on the last AASD referendum, well above the average for the rest of the city. Despite the perceived inevitability, please reflect on the following as you make the decision. 1, you control the process for making this cluster of 3 decisions. We've made the first 2 more palatable, but the claim that we won't put time into the what until the other 2 are made by the board. Yet public communications of the district and the focus of the board's work session last month was almost exclusively about how excited we are about a very specific reuse of the building. This use does not demonstrate greater investment in the affected students and this neighborhood. You control the continued use of siloed decision-making. Taking one problem at a time and disregarding the effects of its decision on future decisions cannot possibly lead to an optimal solution. The school is small because of attendance boundary changes and facility decisions made over the last several decades. The staffing formula efficiencies broke because of the decision to move ABS. The decision to eliminate the 3-year entry period for staff created more educator turnover. Number 3, you decide if we are equitably investing in our school communities. One of the reasons given to close the school is that no matter what, it cannot have enough students inside the building to receive a full-time student services support team. I urge the board to ask yourself, based on the current funding formula, how many of our learning communities are prevented from ever receiving these teams? If we believe that is important to educational outcomes, why have we designed a formula that systematically disadvantaged some school communities over others? We can't change the past. However, please ensure that as you move forward, you have one core question in mind. Will the method and message of each decision build or diminish the trust, engagement, and support of the community? This institution has relied on the support of these neighborhoods for over a century. While there are certainly positive indications during tonight's work session, right now, the message I'm hearing from my neighbors and current Columbus and Edison parents is that they feel defeated, taken for granted, and that their voice doesn't matter as these decisions are approached with inevitability. This should cause us all pause as we consider the very real needs this district will have in the coming years for community support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next signed up is Christine Codner.
Noisy shoes.
Welcome, Christine. So if you can just make sure that the microphone is on, green button.
The light screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christy Codner and I'm here as a citizen, not as a parent. And I live on Sunbeam Court over by Appleton East. The reason of my concern tonight is the fact that this seems to be a rushed decision. From an outside perspective, as a public member, seeing that in the news in September, we heard about this grand opening of the playground, and it was such a celebration for this community. To hear that we don't even know what purpose that playground will serve is concerning. The other aspect is that this is, I was surprised to see this brought up in December. December is one of the most busy times of the year, especially for parents, but for all of us. And it was a month where there was just one board meeting. I think that I saw there were 4 meetings on this with teachers, PTO, and parents, 2 for Columbus, 2 for Edison. In December, again, that requires a lot of planning on the part of all of us to be able to make time to attend those meetings. And I think the school board has a responsibility to go above and beyond on an issue like this that involves the closure and repurposing of a school that's been around for over 125 years. And then my second concern is for the long-term impact that this will have on the students who are impacted by this. I think that the school board and administration have really considered the long-term impacts as far as on the district and future students, that this is in their best interest, that it's for the better good. And what I know as a counselor and social worker, that the impact of having to move to a different school is significantly difficult, causes an enormous amount of stress. It's actually considered on the AASD scale an adverse childhood experience that can lead to depression, suicide, for academic outcomes and physical health outcomes as well, just to name just a few. So realizing that, I think it's very important that we are soliciting the impact of those students and the parents in that process, that it not be rushed. It erodes public trust when we don't allow them to be engaged and be thoroughly part of that process of public participation and soliciting input. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Amy Sanders.
Hi, I'm Amy Sanders. I'm coming to you as a mom. I'm a mom to a 14-year-old at Classical who's thriving and headed to North next year as a freshman. And I'm a mom to Amelia Sanders. She currently is going to Janet Berry. And I'm also mom to Charlotte Sanders, who is part of the RISE program right now at Columbus. She is one child in a classroom onto her own because she's just not safe in her body. At this point, the Appleton Area School District hasn't had anything to accommodate her needs. And so here we find ourselves at RISE. You had mentioned moving schools. Charlotte's been to Johnston, McKinley, Huntley, Janet Berry, and now RISE. We're hoping that it can be a permanent home for her because it's at least within the district. But I would encourage you to consider facilitating an AUT community or an AUT school within our district for a district of our size. I would hope that we would have something that could accommodate this growing population of kiddos. You know, I know that Charlotte is on one end of the spectrum where she has profound autism and is very severely affected by her autism. But I have to say that I run a parent support group for the Autism Society of the Fox Valley, and we have a lot of needs. We have a lot of needs in this community. We're a growing population. And so please consider, you know, something permanent and something we can rely on for the future of our kids.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, Julie Philippek.
Okay, whoops. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm Julie Philippek. You all received a letter from me, a long letter talking about the presentation at Columbus, and I refer you back to that. I'm not going to say the same, but I did have a conversation over last weekend with Christine that led me to think I should come back. And I think I just want to speak to you in sort of bigger terms. You know, we live in such a consumer culture. And I feel like we have a situation right now where the district is making decisions, the citizens are sitting back and saying, what are you going to do for us? Or what are you going to not do? What are you doing wrong? What are you doing right? And I don't think we have to function that way. You have in front of you in the Columbus neighborhood, and I believe around Edison as well, committed citizens who care about their schools and care about their children and want to be partners. When I talked in the letter about all the things that neighbors have done at Columbus, I didn't say that to demonstrate to you how much they care. I did it to demonstrate how much we want to be partners and so much want to wrestle with you about the ethical questions here, all the questions for the school and the neighborhood. I mean, people are partisan. They want their school. Of course they do. But people also have the potential to understand the bigger issues, understand that you're dealing with a district and priorities that go beyond the school. People can understand that. There are a group of neighbors who over the last 6 months have been really thinking hard about the question, what do our kids need to thrive in our neighborhood? They're wrestling with that. They're thinking about that. We could be doing that together. You know, I don't have any sense that there's any hope that Columbus Elementary is going to stay. I mean, it was presented as an inevitability. Feels like something of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I understand there are big forces at work. I do understand that. But as we move forward, whatever happens here, I really encourage you, and I'm offering, can we start a dialogue between community members in this area and the district about how we're going to help these kids thrive in this neighborhood and beyond? Because neighborhoods and schools are so linked together. The way the neighborhood goes is the way the school's going to go, and vice versa, right? They're so tied together. Like, we have to work together. We have to bring everybody together around these questions. You know, when one of the neighbors at Columbus was expressing concerns about what was going to happen to the building, and the message back was, you know, we have to think about educating our students. That needs to be our focus, educating our students, which is absolutely the case. I'm out of time. We can all think together about that, and we can all think together about the health of the neighborhood, because I think those decisions fit together. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Okay. Seeing no additional takers, then I will close public input. And we will move on with our agenda. We are now on number 6, and with a business services update. Ellie. Ellie joining us remotely. Oh, okay. All right, thanks, Holly.
Sorry about that. Business Services has 2 items for your consideration tonight. The first is the accounts payable check register for December. The details are included in your item for consideration. And this item has been moved from the superintendent's consent agenda to 10C under board business for your consideration. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, and the second item then is the list of gifts, donations, and local grants for the fall of 2024. The total of 136 local gifts, donations, and grants is $320,767. The list, including donor amounts and descriptions, were included in your packet. You will be asked to approve this as part of the superintendent's consent agenda under 8A. Are there any questions on this item?
No questions, just want to thank all the donors. Looking through the list, there's just such an amazing list of small businesses, large corporations, individuals, and it's really amazing to see everyone come together to support students in our communities.
Thank you. The next would be school student services update. Dr. McQuaid.
Good evening, everybody. On December 9th, the Assessment Curriculum and Instruction team brought forward 4 items of information for our materials purchase, The Alchemist for ELA 12, updated standards and dual credit opportunities in our technical and engineering courses at the high school, as well as new 8th grade electives in arts and exploratory music and career and technical education providing more choice for our 8th grade students. Tonight, I seek your consideration for approval in those areas under the superintendent's consent agenda.
One question on the grade 8, some of the new courses that have been offered, it looks like there's not a fiscal note on it. So are there supplies and instruments and all of that?
Yeah, so we're not anticipating a great deal at this point in time. Once we go through the registration process, we may find a surplus of interest in an area, at which point we bring forward additional information. But at this point in time, we have all the materials and resources we need without knowing what registration is going to look like.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then next, Personnel Services update, Julie King.
Good evening. Personnel Services has 5 items on the superintendent's consent agenda. Those are items 8F through J, including 6 new educator hires, 2 educator contract changes, 3 professional educator resignations, 1 administrative resignation at the conclusion of the school year, which is Kelly Collins at Ferber. I'd like to thank her for her service. And then 1 internship, and the internship, it was corrected. So it was initially listed at Houdini. It is Ferber. So that was corrected on the item. Any questions?
Thank you. We will move to the board's consent agenda, which is just 1 set of meeting minutes from December 9th. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, so moved.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Pam. Oh. We have multiple seconds, but pick one. Okay. Roll call, please.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
James Bacon,
Aye.
Kay Eckert,
Aye.
Chris Sauter, Ping Tao,
Aye.
and Ed Ruffalo.
Aye.
Okay, the next, the superintendent's consent agenda. Mr. Hartsis.
The superintendent's consent agenda includes 10 items for your consideration. The first item, 8A, was reported on by Holly Bird during the business services update. The next 4 items were reported on by Dr. McQuaid during his update. And then the last 5 items were reported on by Julie King during the personnel services update. And I recommend approval of these items 8A through J.
I'll move approval of the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please. Kayla.
Ed Ruffalo,
Aye.
James Bacon,
Aye.
Kay Eggert,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Ping Tao,
Aye.
and Jason Kolpak.
Aye.
Moving on, we are to reports under 9, report from school and student services, Spanish 4.
Hello again. Tonight I bring Kelly Leopold forward to talk about a resource material for our Spanish 4 classes.
Good evening. Excuse me. So I'd like to start by explaining to you that the Noches Misteriosas in Granada, sorry to my Spanish colleagues for not pronouncing that as well as they'd like, but this was a book that we brought or purchased in 2021 to be used in lit circles with our Spanish 4 as an option. And over the last 2 years, the resounding voice we've heard from students is this is an excellent book and we should be reading this as a class. The teachers have really been enjoying it too. So I'm here this evening to seek board approval as rather than a supplemental, but a text that all Spanish 4 students would be reading. It will be used with Unit 1B, Los Jóvenes del Pasado. And as you've heard me say before, the impact of read alouds in our classrooms, whether it's ELA, social studies, or world language, any of the humanities, is going to offer reading, writing, and speaking in the classroom for our students. So in this case, we are talking about literary analysis alongside language acquisition, cultural exploration, and historical context. There is no cost because these were already purchased in 2021. So just to speak a little bit further, why the novel will allow students to, access the material. When we think about serving all students, this text is written in a format that is for your intermediate students. When we think of ACTFL, which is our national organization for foreign language teachers, when they consider the standards for students, this will allow our students to access the materials, meaning it's not written like other chapter novels might be. It's written in simpler terms, but still incredibly engaging. With character development, it's going to allow our students to use claim evidence and reasoning and textual evidence. Discussion, as I mentioned, that discourse is so important in the classroom, and reflection, as well as connection to history, geography, art, and science classes. So they're really excited about how they can integrate that with the other courses the students are taking at the typically sophomore or junior level. And the novel is a mystery fiction. And as I mentioned, novice, mid, intermediate, low range for target language. It follows what you would think of, a fiction suspense novel would have, that with the introduction of the main character, development of the mystery, and then concluding with a resolution. There's a lot of dialogue, incredibly important for the students. That's where they really can access it. They can act it out in class for further understanding. And there's many significant themes. So as you heard in the title, it takes place in Granada, Spain. And that is a city that is really rich culturally, historically, religiously. So there is a lot of ties to what they're studying in their social studies class and bringing in background knowledge from their sophomore year. Some inquiry, identities, discovery, etc. We did seek public input and had one response that was in favor. Supporting the text to be challenging, entertaining, helping the students to learn the past tenses, and include significant cultural aspects. And then lastly, the instruction will benefit again by that integration I already mentioned. The transfer of skills from an ELA and social studies class, using all 3 modes of communication, and again, honoring student voice. Does anyone have any questions for me this evening?
I think it's terrific that it's now coming. I mean, we've already had the book, but now it's being seen as it's a way to have more students use the text. So I think that it's pretty good endorsement.
Well, thank
It's
you.
already been it's already been used and found to be a good source. So
Yes. Thank you, Kay.
but anything else?
Okay, thank you again.
Okay, and then so we will see this at our next board meeting as an item for consideration.
Correct.
All right. Wonderful. You don't have anything else, do you? No.
I don't. I'm just waiting for the next section.
Great. That's fine. I gave you enough chance to present. Okay. All right. We are going to move on to board business. First would be our WASB resolutions. And I'm going to ask Nick to start this discussion.
Okay, thank you. So just quick background. So the Wisconsin Association of School Boards holds a delegate assembly at the state convention every year. I was chosen, I volunteered for it, but then you chose me to be the delegate for this delegate assembly for the second time in a row. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's a very interesting process. So basically what happens is a series of resolutions will be offered for the delegate assembly to vote on. These resolutions direct the Wisconsin Association of School Boards and their legislative affairs work, meaning what the delegate assembly passes as far as resolutions are not any sort of law that can be enforced. They tell the WASB how to lobby at the state legislature, and it's meant to be a voice of all of the Wisconsin state school boards and what they want the state legislature to do to better support public education. And I'll stop there. Would anyone like to correct or add to anything about that?
Excellent summary.
Okay, thank you. And so this year they're offering 12 resolutions. So it is my hope that we can speed through these relatively quickly. And then so admin is also prepared to let us know their thoughts. So basically how I'm thinking this can go is that we'll go through each resolution one by one. And then so we'll mention the resolution. And then I guess, should admin say what they think first, or should we say what we think first? I think we should do that. That's what I'm gonna say. Unless you have a thought on that.
So you're saying you would like admin to give you their thoughts first, or do you want board members?
Let's have board members do it first.
Okay.
If that's okay. So I guess what I'm gonna do is just say what I was thinking, and then if anyone wants to add or say, no, actually, it should be this, we'll do that. And then after that, admin can tell us their take, and then we'll deal with any disagreements and move on. Hopefully, we'll see how this goes. Okay? Okay, so the first one is called the Blue Ribbon Commission on Funding. This is an amendment to an existing resolution, basically asking the state legislature to actually do something about the Blue Ribbon Commission report on school funding. And in my research, I was not able, the only way I could find the actual report was going on board docs and searching our previous meetings. The link is broken on DPI website. The link is broken on the state legislature website. So an example of one of the 20 recommendations they have is to change student funding weight calculations for specific student populations, like ELL students, for example, getting weighted a little bit more than, so 1.2 FTE versus 1. So that's just one example of what these suggestions are. My thought is to support the resolution. Seeing supports all around.
I don't know if you want any further comments, Nick, but that's basically what we were going to say as well. It's
Oh,
just,
well,
the Blue Ribbon Commission spent a lot of time doing the research that they did. And I particularly liked the comment on here. Despite bipartisan nature of the work and support from the public K-12 education community, the findings of the commission have yet to be acted upon. Let's do something.
thank you for that. And as we continue to go through, I just want to remind everyone that we can, amendments are possible at the delegate assembly. So for any board member who thinks yes, but, feel free to mention those things. So moving on to the next one, Resolution 2502, Pathway to Licensure for Paraprofessionals. This again is an amendment of an existing resolution that only the amended change is to add the word or in the sentence. I'll just read it. The WASB supports reasonable efforts to provide pathways to licensure for teaching candidates where there is a shortage of licensed teachers, provided that candidates have bachelor's degrees and/or, the or is the amendment, are qualified to be in a classroom as demonstrated by appropriate experience, etc. The rationale suggested is this gives individual districts the leeway to identify individuals that are doing a great job in their schools that may not have a bachelor's degree. That's my understanding of this, and my first thought is to support.
I mean, the questionable word for me is always reasonable efforts. I mean, and I would want some assurance that the individuals are on a pathway to be licensed. And so to do that without giving up on qualifications, but I would be interested to hear what Julie King has to think about this.
Well, Julie King would be in support. I think this is one step going forward. You know, we've made steps towards apprenticeships. And I think size of district matters in some of these cases and ability. We've had great success with our Pathways program, which is kind of an internal growth program, but we are limited with that bachelor's degree. There are many states that do not require the bachelor's degree, but do require that rigorous on-the-job teaching experience. And I think just generationally, that's where we're at with some of the competing different types of careers that are out there. So we would be in support.
I guess initially when I read this, I circled like rigorous training because I am concerned that there would be, you know, what would we define as rigorous training, and would every district be defining in a different way? And I know that we have a shortage, but I just want to make sure that the people that we're are trained and have enough experience, say with a cooperating teacher, with kind of going through all the processes, because I think sometimes when people don't have the appropriate knowledge, it leads to frustration and they end up leaving. So I don't know how, you know, WASB determines what that rigorous training would be, but I'm hoping that there would be some sort of outline of what that looks like so that districts would be doing it in a similar way.
I could speak to Appleton. So currently you can't obtain an emergency license without a bachelor's degree. That is required no matter what that bachelor degree is in. So somebody could have a bachelor's degree, no experience working with students, and be eligible for an emergency license. We've found great success with our paraprofessionals who've had 5 years working with a teacher, have great aptitude in working with students, really understand and are committed to the school culture. So we do have systems in place. Right now, those individuals also have to have a bachelor's degree, but that bachelor's degree can be prohibitive to some employees. We don't find necessarily people going back for a complete education degree or starting from scratch. That's a huge undertaking. Appleton particularly, we have taken steps to grow your own programming in which we'd be able to support that. And we think we could do that very well for some of our paraprofessionals.
And I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah.
you, Julie. I'm just stating that I think it's really important that there's some sort of criteria, because it seems like that could happen easily just because people are so desperate to get individuals into the classroom. And I think our goal is to have really qualified teachers statewide.
Depending on how the board feels, they could ask for an amendment to that to include apprenticeships or a structure. I mean, if that's the way the board feels here with that resolution. My feeling is this resolution does open it for apprenticeships, because right now the law requires a bachelor's degree. This opens it up to other experiences.
So my thought is, like, I'm taking notes on what everyone is saying, and like, at this moment, I'm not prepared to offer an amendment, but I have a feeling you won't be the only, like, what I would like to do is, take notes from the discussion and bring it back to the report, like, because what happened last year is, stuff that we had discussed in the same way did come up at the assembly. So, my thought is that I would vote to support with the understanding that we want some more clarity on what does rigorous training mean? What does reasonable mean in this context? Unless someone opposes that.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. So moving on, number 3. Resolution 2503, early literacy assessments for English learners. Some of you may remember that we did talk about this one last year because WASB has a process for late submitted resolutions. So this resolution was voted down. So the process, it wasn't voted down on the merits, it was voted down. It was decided by the assembly not to move it into a full discussion on the merits. So the sponsoring district, which was MPS, Milwaukee Public Schools, was able to submit it on time, and it did get through the committee. So that's why we are talking about this again. And basically it is encouraging the state legislature to adapt Act 20 to ensure that materials are provided in languages other than English, so that we are testing students' literacy and not their knowledge of English. My first thought is to support this resolution.
I'd like to hear from the administration on this one.
We would agree in supporting this resolution. Just because a student can't read in English doesn't mean that they cannot read. We worry that labeling them as at risk, floods are at-risk support systems. And we want to focus our resources in the right area, which would be helping them acquire the English language, not labeling them as at risk because they are able to read in their home language. Further, we'd say that currently we can assess in English and in Spanish. We would hope that we'd be able to assess in other languages in the future too, as a result of this.
I know that in Appleton, we have a large number of languages that we have to support. If this were to pass, would that incur any financial burden on the district that we would be concerned about at all? Like, I don't know, like 30 or 40 languages, right?
Yeah, so there are a lot of languages. Currently, the state, 65. Any one school, I think the most we have in any one school is 38 right now, but 65 across the breadth of our district. And right now, the state provides the screener, but it's only in English and Spanish right now. So
So it would be on the state to provide those languages.
hopefully,
Yeah, you
we
would,
hope.
yeah.
Maybe that's the note, Nick. Not to have it unfunded.
The responsibility should be on the state.
See if we can get funded mandates.
All right, so I'm going to. Yes, so we're going to support this. All right, number 4, decoupling public and private school funding. This is to create a new resolution that would say the WASB supports separating state funding for voucher schools and independent charter schools from the school aid formula. And the rationale is that the rationale is very clearly explained, so I won't rehash it. In my own words, I think my first thought is to support this. And how about admin?
We would support this resolution. Current revenue limits include the private school voucher payments. Costs of the voucher payments end up buried in the public school formula, even though we don't ever see any of those dollars. These costs are then passed on directly to taxpayers. We feel the state should fund that program. Last year as an example, or this current year, $8.3 million in, as part of our funding is actually vouchers. So 67 cents of our tax mill rate is for voucher programs. So decoupling with that would be much more transparent for the taxpayers.
Holly, this would not necessarily give us any more money because we still have X number of students enrolled that we multiply.
This would not give us any more funding. This money is directly we are just the pass through. Like I said, it never even hits our books technically. It is just, we are just a function. So like I said, it gets buried in the formula. And so the general public may or may not be aware of how much is actually going.
Yeah, so Nick, this I'm sure is part of the discussion. I always worry a little bit about decoupling because that would give the opportunity to enhance funding to the voucher schools without ever appearing down at the local schools. So now we could potentially be creating two funding streams. One could be very generous and one could not be nearly as generous for the public schools, depending on what current political mood and will is. I'm always, at least this way, the two come together.
I guess
But-
I'd respectfully disagree with you there, Ed. That's happening now. You saw the last go around with the state budget and voucher programs got significant increases where the public schools did not. So even though the formula was combined, they funded them differently. They continue to fund them differently. We're just asking them to be transparent.
The rationale seems to be we're saving dollars on local property tax, which districts could then use, and that doesn't really ring true to me in how this works. You may save some dollars for the local property taxpayers, but it's not going to bring any more dollars to invest. So anyways, I'm in support of the general concept. I just not sure I understand their rationale completely.
Definitely report back on how this discussion goes as well. Okay. The next is number 5, consistent standards across all Wisconsin schools. This is an amendment to an existing resolution, and it is adding the word reporting. So I'll just read current resolution. All publicly funded schools, including private schools receiving voucher funding, must have the exact same accountability reporting, and that is what is being added, and transparency standards / requirements. And again, this is what kind of is similar to the previous resolution. It's just about, putting that burden of accountability and transparency that public schools have also on the voucher schools that receive public dollars. And I would think, I would vote to support this. And I see any words from admin or, okay?
Nope, we agree.
Okay, so we're almost halfway done. Number 6, early childhood education funding and public-private partnerships. So this is to create a resolution that supports state-funded public school 3K and full-day 4K for all Wisconsin children. And in the text of the resolution, there's explicit support for collaboration in order to make this work. And from what I know about our district, this is how we do our, at least community 4K. I support the idea of universal 3K and 4K for all Wisconsin students. So
I would agree. I
Yes.
mean, is there, I don't, Can't imagine a downside.
The only downside that we've seen with it is there's a lot in here. 3K, 4K plus the Title I, but in speaking with the administrators we work with in all of these areas, we are in support of additional funding for our early childhood.
Okay. Number 7, staff mental health. The WASB supports legislation to fund statewide mental health initiatives for district staff in order to help improve staff mental health and increase retention rates. And I support this, you know, I guess I have questions about like, I absolutely support this. The only question is like, what's the trade-off? If there is gonna be a trade-off, if like but maybe there is no trade-off. It's just my thought. Anyone else?
I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I would agree. It seems a little vague on what does this mean? Is it grants? I don't really. I'm not sure if it's a philosophical statement or if it's, how do you do it?
So I would ask for admin thoughts maybe?
Well, we would agree. We had the same questions about what would the funding come from and what would it look like? We certainly would support any and welcome any funding for mental health and the well-being of our staff.
All right.
I just want to say that when I first read that, you know, and I would agree, I think it's important. But I hope we're not overlooking other ways to help with staff, attracting staff and retention, including, you know, working conditions and salaries and those sorts of things.
I agree that your point about like the structure of the actual work environment is probably the most critical thing to a staff person's mental health. So, yeah. So I'm gonna, unless there are other comments, we're gonna support that one. Number 8, accountability and school report card standards. This is to create a new resolution that says the WASB supports timely revision of the school accountability system to calculate school and district report card overall scores based on student achievement only. Other data may be included for informational purposes, but not used in calculating the overall score. Consistent grade bands should be used rather than school building configuration. So I'm certainly no expert on all of the different formulas that go into state report cards, and I believe that there's probably no one even in the DPI who's an expert on all of that stuff. But while there are significant issues that we all see maybe with the state report card system, I don't think that this would be the right way to go about fixing it. In my research, the state report card weighs 4 priority areas. So one is achievement, and then the others are growth, target group outcomes, and on track to graduation. And I feel that it would not be beneficial to remove growth, target group outcomes, and on track to graduation. So my first thought is to vote to not support this, mainly because you lose sight of historically marginalized students, especially when you think about Wisconsin schools and the way that demographics work in our schools.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think then you're back to, you're going to be comparing, you know, apples and oranges. I mean, I don't know if how it's happening now is necessarily the best method. I think the attempts are to try to deal with what they used to call the value added. You know, you're trying to account for just the inherent differences in your demographics and the needs within your schools, and, you know, maybe so I'm surprised, actually. This one actually surprises me. Just seems like it's too simple for, or people are just so sick of the report cards. It's just like, let's just be done with it. And it feels like a step backwards.
I know you didn't ask, but I'm gonna give an opinion on that. I think that it's coming from some districts that are doing well, but they are not seeing the growth part, and with the met or the weight that is put on growth, it becomes an opportunity of equity hoarding. And if they're not getting the accolades of saying that growth, so they might not get those points in which they look like they're doing so much better, which creates a gap between other schools that might be seeing some serious growth happening. And that might put them up to exceeding or meeting expectations. So it's another barrier. Now I think of 1952, 54, 56, 58, when we desegregated schools, then you created AP classes, then you created the ACT, and then the College Board came in to continue to set up barriers. This is another avenue of attempting to set up barriers to hold certain communities down, in my opinion.
Anyone else?
Dr. McQuaid?
So we would support Nick's opinion on this. You nailed it, Nick. I would say as complex as the formula can be, it's as fair a formula as we have. Straight achievement does not tell the whole story. Even in a homogeneous school district, the target population is important because it's your lowest 20% scoring students. And in education, we always want to make sure that we're trying to get everybody across that finish line.
Do not support.
Okay, thank you very much. Number 9, educational objectives. This is to amend an existing resolution on educational objectives. And basically they're adding a phrase to the language of the resolution, and that phrase is so I'll read the sentence. WASB supports local initiatives that promote increased student academic achievement in key curricular areas with the intent of ensuring college, career, and workforce readiness, in addition to supporting the development of critical thinking and problem-solving skills. And the rationale provided for this is that language wasn't in there before, and that should be the point of improving student achievement. I support, I guess, but it's not like I don't have a strong feeling of this. It seems a little superfluous to me, but I mean, yeah. Any other thoughts? Admin?
We would agree with you on this, is as long as we don't consider or continue or attempt to create additional criteria towards graduation, which creates some barriers towards that, and then which we then have to create other avenues or pathways to get through it. Because at this point, it doesn't add any financial barriers. But if we added additional graduation requirements, that would mean that we would need additional staff, additional to be able to offer those, or something has to go. And then at that point, students that might not be engaged in a particular class, but are really coming in for auto or for CTE, have to sacrifice somewhere there. And so I think with clear communication, we would agree with you on that.
Okay, so vote to support, but. Okay, next one, 10, truancy. This is an amendment to the existing resolution on truancy. So the WASB supports legislation which would clarify the responsibilities of school districts, parents, students, courts, and law enforcement agencies in the enforcement of truancy laws. And the resolution is asking to strike through to get rid of the following language and provide greater latitude in applying disciplinary measures to keep students in school, and instead replace it with the goal of keeping students in school by using strengths-based and evidence-based approaches that focus on families, schools, and community organizations. And the rationale is that amending it will better align it with emerging research and data on how to approach truancy, with the focus on the strengths-based approach. And I know this is currently a hot topic in our district and across the state. My feeling is to support this, and I'd love to hear others, including admin.
I was just gonna ask for the admin to opine on this one first.
Did you want to speak first, Chris?
Well, I was just, I mean, I do think that, maybe this varies district to district. I do think that what we are trying to do is very much the strengths based. But if that still is not working, I mean, and I just didn't, so, when they had the language, provide greater latitude in applying disciplinary measures to keep students in schools. I'm not sure. I mean, but there's still the truancy laws. So I guess I'm not really understanding. I mean, maybe what they want to do is that you would attempt and you're going to try to solve these dilemmas in these situations, looking at strengths-based solutions first. But what if it still leaves a situation where the student is still not coming to school and you still have the truancy laws? So there's a little bit of a disconnect for me. I'm not just not. So maybe I'll ask. I mean, I don't have anything else to say other than.
So I think you actually have the exact right idea. We need some clarity here. I would just want to illustrate the fact that this summer when WASB, the Association of School Boards, was seeking someone to present on steps to address student attendance, they sought out the Appleton Area School District, and our team went and presented to WASB. Additionally, CISA 6 was doing regional presentations on truancy, and they sought our people to present on what we're doing. And then some of you were able to attend the Outagamie County Truancy Summit. And again, our people were presenting there. From that, DPI has on 2 separate occasions sought our people to work on the statewide level with addressing truancy. Point being, we have been utilizing strengths-based approaches and trying to add in so many additional supports that we can. And what we would recommend is that we dig deeper, because yes, absolutely, that collaboration is necessary, but we would want to see that it continues to be about collaboration. That's been key for our people, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that in some cases, the truancy citation is the one thing that gets our kids into school. And we don't have that right now. And we've seen the difference that can make for limited folks. And we don't want to see that opportunity go away. So we would want it to be, this to be conditional, like look at it closely and listen for what keywords they're seeing.
It almost seems to be like you could keep the section that's stricken and add the extra language.
I was just gonna say, would y'all be okay if the opportunity arises to offer that as an amendment, that we do that?
I do just want to add quickly, because we have spent a lot of time on this as a district. We spent an incredible amount of resources on the strength-based approach, as Laura was just stating. Where we struggle is in the first part, because we don't have courts or law enforcement that are engaged in attendance right now. And that's a significant struggle for us in Appleton. So across the state, that is very, very uncommon. So this makes more sense to districts that have a little bit more consequences than we do. I do think underneath what is stricken perhaps is something like a suspension. I don't think anybody would advocate for a suspension of a student who's not coming to school regularly. that's counterproductive, right? So that's maybe what they're referring to here. But anyway, I don't disagree at all with your assessment.
Okay, so I will definitely report back on that for everybody. Okay, two more. Well, technically, anyway, just moving on. Number 11, funding for school meal debt. The WASB supports legislation that allocates money to reimburse districts for the cost of unpaid school meal debt if they are feeding all students without stigma. My perspective is that this was related to some news that we saw last year. But I mean, I do support the spirit of the resolution. I do think there's like a lack of clarity on the without stigma piece. So I don't know how to deal with that, but yeah.
So this came up a year or two ago after the federal government stopped they had fully funded meals during COVID. And then after that ended, this came up. And that some schools do it, some states do it. There's some lack of clarity just in the whole statement. It's unclear the amount the schools would be eligible to receive and what reporting or accountability requirements would be. This data is incredibly sensitive. We are limited in a district our size. I think there's literally 3 people that have access to all the free and reduced data, myself not included. We're very sensitive about that. So I guess that's one of my cautions. It is also unclear if this would be for unpaid balances only or for all students to receive free meals. If it is for unpaid balances only, this would incentivize families to not pay their bills. And this would cause the cost to the state to increase significantly. So I have some cautions about this. I am very hesitant to support this resolution for those reasons. My opinion, these funds could be better served, could better serve students if you issued in another way, per pupil funding, for example.
Before I jump in with, unless, basically having heard that, like, again, I support the idea of every student eating for low to no cost. But I would be okay not voting to approve this resolution as it is written because of so much of the vagueness and unanswered questions.
I feel like previously there was a resolution that was specifically just for universal free lunches, and I believe that was voted down. This seems like a stopgap towards that. And I think the way it's written is, like Holly described, is I would support universal free lunches at the state level, but this doesn't seem to be kind of meeting the need.
Okay. Thank you. Number 12, cybersecurity. The WASB calls upon the legislature to allocate funding to school districts for cybersecurity measures, including but not limited to cybersecurity software/hardware, upgrades, and training for personnel. Furthermore, WASB encourages school boards to develop a plan of action or a policy, and then it further elaborates on what that would best include. We often have these discussions at the board level. We're often checking in on how is our cybersecurity doing, thanks to individual members on the board. I see no issue with supporting this.
We completely agree. In June of 23, we invested in a 5-year program that costed us $2.45 million. Included hardware, software, support, and licensing. We added a one-time FTE to that department just to manage that. And we spend about $6,000 a year on cybersecurity training. And a great example is This past year, we had 59 million emails in the district. 42 million were spam. So.
There are a number of local districts and businesses been stricken and fallen prey to these problems, and they're incredibly expensive and hard to deal with, and any support we can get to do that, I would support.
Okay, and that is the end of the list of resolutions, but I did want to bring up one more thing because there is a process to bring back resolutions that the committee did not approve. We saw that happen last year with a resolution that mimics a resolution that was in the state legislature. It was called Saving Women's Sports, and it was about trans students' participation in sports. The letter that went out to everyone this year specifically said, please make sure you review the turn down resolutions because one of the main so to make a long story short, I anticipate that this will come up again in the same manner. There have already been WPR articles where school boards have talked about this specific issue at the delegate assembly and their plans to support it. So last year, I advocated to not bring this to the full floor for a vote because it has to go through 2 votes. 1, will we consider this? And then 2, do we approve of this resolution or not? And one of the reasons I said we should not consider it is because I didn't have time to discuss this with my board. So I will not be able to use that excuse. So I just want to bring up this issue and to say that my intention would be to vote no on moving it forward on the floor for a full vote on the merits. And then if it did move there, I would also vote no because WIAA has standards and also like there are regulatory obligations and laws and stuff like that, which put that responsibility on the WIAA as far as I understand. And the purpose of this whole thing, the delegate assembly and WASB in general, is about consensus building. And what do we all agree with as state of school boards? And this is very like not in the interest of consensus building. So any other thoughts or comments on that?
No, I think that I didn't realize that you would still be able to consider resolutions that were not approved last year. So that would have been our responsibility to go back and look at I didn't do that, but.
And that's okay. Most people didn't last year, and that's why they, in their letter, they put it in bold. All right, thank you, everyone. I know that was very long and not what many of the folks here came for, so thank you.
That's great. And thank you for representing us at the delegate assembly. So thanks for your work. We are going to move on. Now we're to 10B. This is regarding a policy adoption. It's a new board policy that the board policy committee has worked on and created, and it was included in your it's included in board docs. Basically, our draft closely aligns with the WASB sample. And it addresses board members' use of electronic communications in general and identifies recommended and non-recommended uses of electronic communication. The primary purpose is to notify individual board members of the significant legal obligations and complex legal issues that can arise with regard to electronic communication. So, anyways, I don't know if people had a chance to look through it. If you have any specific questions, we can talk about it, or if you.
Just a question.
Yes.
So like many board members, I'll have members of the public reach out to me with questions, and I prefer up till now to have done that in my personal email because I feel that it And no, I think it makes it very clear that if I'm responding to a question or we're talking about an issue, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board or the district. And I can always put a line in there saying, these are my opinions only. So I thought it was protective of my board obligations and not misrepresenting that I'm speaking to the board. This would seem to suggest that I shouldn't be doing that. I should be using my board email if members of the public have questions. Could you, maybe I'm misinterpreting that, or could you help explain that?
I think if you've been contacted because you are a board member, people are thinking you're serving as a board member. And as an individual board member, you can express your thoughts on a subject. You can clarify you're speaking for yourself as a board member. And so all of that should be done. And if it's not done initially through the board email, but then if you can forward it to your board email, because then the preservation of that falls under, the district, and then you personally don't have to worry about finding it, because that correspondence, if it is part of your duty as a board member, that would be subject to open records. And so then you would be responsible for providing all of that. We did have a question because we said, well, what about text messages or, and so we did, talk with WASB about that, or, it's best to preserve everything in its original form. But, so let's say it's a blog post. In time, the control of that blog may not stay under your own, it might not always be your responsibility to preserve it that way. So, perhaps a screenshot and then getting it to your board email account for preservation. But that is not ideal because there could be perhaps some change to that original. It might not stay in its original form. So I think that's why this policy is to help advise board members that there is legal responsibility. You are now the record keeper of these communications. And the best way to do it is actually, because we do have, we do have district emails, and we do have a way that those can be kept. And we do have someone who would oversee all of the open records requests if those would happen. So.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I'm happy to follow whatever the policy. They just didn't interpret it that way up until I read this.
Yeah, but other members of the committee.
That's right. Shared.
Yeah, and this aligns with, I went to some, onboarding trainings from like WASB and stuff like that when I first joined. And this aligns with what they have shared in those spaces about, like, I get stuff to my campaign email, even though I'm not using it. So anything that's written and is us communicating about our school board role or in our school board role should be forwarded to our district email. Yeah.
Except for any campaign types of activities.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was using like people contacting my campaign email with questions about my work on the board currently. Yeah. Or messages on social media or anything like that.
Thank you for keeping us safe. Certainly follow the policy.
I don't know that this is necessarily something that needs to be like in the policy differently, but kind of on the note of what you just brought up. I do think in some ways it could be helpful if our individual board emails were more readily available so that people didn't find as many alternative ways to contact us as an individual. And I think if we have the board email, I think it should go to all board members immediately, not have to be forwarded on, because that makes responding harder if we do need to respond. But I also think that the public expects that we see emails immediately, because that is a pretty common expectation in today's society. And I know, for instance, you know, before several board meetings, when people have a lot of last minute things that can't come, you know, I don't think it's fair to them that we might not have an opportunity to even see their comment before a meeting about that topic. And I don't think it's fair for someone's responsibility in the district to be to monitor that all the time to try to get it to all of us as quickly as possible. So I know not directly, you know, the same as this policy, but like, I think it is very related in ways that impact the way we work. And those are changes I would very much personally think would be appropriate and make this policy an easier thing to for each individual board member to uphold, to be honest.
We've had some of this discussion before, and I think as far as trying to have a consistent way that all board members see all of the messages, you know, and in trying to, and then having to make sure that there is response to them, to have them go to one, but we certainly can revisit that again. And during busy times, it can be hard to know that someone has sent an email, maybe an hour before a meeting, and then get it out to everyone and they have time, you know, or it can come during a meeting. That has happened too, or during a work session for the meeting. So I understand what you're saying. And so maybe that would be, I don't know if that necessarily would be go in the policy, but that would just be how we do business.
Yes, and just to make sure that's clear, like I am not advocating with my recommendation that we change the policy per se, just that I think changing the way we work in this way would also help us better and more easily live out some of what I think is within this policy. And it felt like an appropriate time to bring back the conversation because I agree we've kind of talked about it and not really ever, in my opinion, changed anything or had conclusions come from the conversation.
So would you recommend that when board members would get emails to their individual board accounts, that then they would submit them to the rest of the board members? Or not necessarily?
I'm open for a conversation. I think we could like norm on best practices there. I mean, again, we know that people currently reach out to us as individuals. And we're essentially, in this case, saying we should try to funnel all that back through here, but no one has access to our board email addresses. We don't publish them anywhere. And they don't follow the same schema that the rest of the district follows. And so people guess at them and get them wrong. Then they find us on Facebook, or they find us on our campaign stuff, or they text us, or they, you know, and like, to me, that is just causing more challenge and confusion to get a hold of us. And then it's causing things like what Ed just described. Well, I assume this was okay because now this is how they think they can get in touch with me. But then, I mean, it's much more difficult as a board member to, okay, you email me here, you text me. Well, let me now just respond to you and tell you to text me over here or email me over here or find a way to get that here and then send it back to you. It just causes a lot of extra, I think, work and confusion in trying to uphold this policy and be available to our constituencies in the best way we can. Whether or not we norm that if we get individually emailed, we have to share that with everyone, I think is maybe a slightly different conversation, but related for sure. And I'm not necessarily prepared to advocate one way or the other right now on that.
I agree that we should take a look at how we logistically deal with the board email. And in previous discussions, I thought we did come to a conclusion without a vote that like something would be changed as far as like how it's received and how it gets distributed to us as board members. And unfortunately, I can't remember, but I remember that we did talk about that. However, like I don't know, that on the one hand, I don't agree that that will get rid of the problem because people will always continue to use every other means but the one you want them to get in touch with you. And it's still always on us to make sure all of our written communication is available for public records requests, regardless of where it comes. That's it.
I think there's two conversations going on here. I'm curious, the policy on the agenda is listed as an item of information. Is this coming in the future for a vote?
It would.
Okay.
It would. this was for discussion, to bring up questions, and then at a future meeting. But then the separate additional discussion about whether or not to publish our individual board emails. But I think that we should have some more discussion on that, because then what should we do about follow through on those and responding and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and so just to disaggregate the conversations, I will just say, since I was the one that brought up the parallel conversation, not that I would advocate that we add the conversation I brought up about like, how do we handle emails and that piece, maybe at a future work session and or board meeting, whatever is more appropriate. I don't have a particular preference, but I think we should have that conversation, and this, I think, is a nice entry into that.
Just a quick follow-up question. It was always my understanding that if somebody sends an email to the board in general, the only person that should respond to that is the board president, because only the president speaks for the board. So sometimes if a constituent wants to talk to us directly, maybe something we said in the public meeting, they think it's a topic that's of interest to us, they shouldn't send it to the overall board then, correct? They should be, so we'd almost, to James's point, we'd have to be publishing our individual email addresses then. I guess that's one of the other reasons I use a personal email, because I'm trying to make it very clear. I don't speak for the board, that's the board president. And I'm just, if you want to dialogue with me about an issue, I try to do it outside of that. But again, I'll comply either way, but there has to be a mechanism then, so I don't misrepresent myself speaking for the board.
Okay, we will put that parallel discussion at a future agenda. Okay. All right, if there's nothing else about this policy, then we are going to move on, knowing that it'll come up again. We good? Okay, then next 10C, the AP check register from December 2024.
I have to abstain from the vote due to a potential conflict of interest.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the check register?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
Chris Sauter, Kay Eger,
Aye.
Ed Ruflo,
Abstain.
James Bacon.
Okay, next 10D, monitoring report OE6, financial administration. We had this presented December 18th. Is there a motion?
So move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Second on that? Okay, great. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call.
James Bacon, Ed Ruflo,
Aye.
Kay Eger,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
and Peng Tao.
Aye.
Okay, 10E, monitoring report OE12, facilities. Again, that was a previous meeting. Motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, roll call.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
Kay Eger,
Aye.
James Bacon, Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Ed Ruflo,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
and Peng Tao.
Aye.
Okay, 10F, results monitoring. R.2.1.1, English language arts.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
any other discussion? No, then roll call, please.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Kay Eger,
Aye.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Ed Ruflo,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
and James Bacon.
And then 10G, results monitoring, R2.1.2 mathematics. Is there a motion to approve the report as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Then roll call, please.
James Bacon, Kay Eggert,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Ed Ruffalo,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak.
Aye.
Okay, we will move to 10H, repurposing of Columbus Elementary School. Just to start this discussion, I wanted to provide just brief comments. We had our work session at 4 o'clock today, and so I just wanted to review some of what has been discussed. To this point, the Board of Education has received input from approximately 30 individuals via emails and in-person comments at recent board meetings. The majority of the individuals are residents of the neighborhoods surrounding Columbus Elementary School, parents of Edison Elementary School students, as well as parents of past, current, and potentially future Columbus students. And of course, I know we all very appreciative for each of those comments that we have received and appreciate hearing the thoughts and concerns and perspectives of individuals, as well as their questions and suggestions. In addition, administration held 5 listening sessions in early December, 3 at Columbus and 2 at Edison. And again, many board members attended these sessions as well. To summarize some of the common concerns, Columbus area residents are concerned about the impact on the neighborhood and feel the decision to move Columbus students should be made at the same time as the boundary decisions and decisions on how the Columbus building will be used. Neighbors asked that we consider consolidating Columbus and Edison such that K-1 students attend Columbus and students in grades 2 to 5 attend Edison, or placing a charter or 4K school at Columbus. Essentially, Columbus neighbors want to see the building continue to serve a purpose for the neighborhood. A number of individuals expressed concerns regarding a thorough transition plan for Columbus students moving to Edison, wanting assurances that Edison students will continue to thrive as they welcome Columbus students over the next several years. In essence, that staffing must adequately meet the needs of the students transitioning to Edison, as well as current Edison students. There is a strong interest in Edison becoming a community school. There is also a strong desire that students should be able to walk safely or bike safely to school. In addition, parents spoke about the need for the district to better support recruitment and retention for neighborhood schools. In response to the input received over the past month, district administration has worked to address the concerns raised regarding the future use of Columbus Elementary and have explored the options that have been suggested. In addition, district administration has put together a draft transition plan, which includes suggestions from other area districts that have consolidated schools in the past 2 years. So I think that's somewhat of a summary of where we are, and to this point, we do have an item of consideration before us tonight. Mr. Hartjes, did you want to add?
Yeah, just again, I just want to summarize. So district concerns regarding low enrollment at Columbus goes back many years, and the negative impact that can have on student success. And so we've been monitoring that for many years. In 2022, we talked about it because we were looking at facilities regarding our referendum planning. And at that time, we said, let's wait and see if Columbus's enrollment comes back after the pandemic. And so we pushed it out 3 years until this past spring, when we started to look at a need for ABS to move based on Zion and our lease being up at Zion. And so we knew when we started started to talk about possibly moving ABS, that would then force us to have a conversation, a discussion about Columbus and the viability of a small neighborhood elementary school being able to remain open. So we knew that was going to happen, but we pushed that out into fall because we wanted to wait until third Friday counts were completed. And then we took on looking, where would ABS go? Where would High go? What would be the boundaries for Sandy Slope and Huntley? And then what would we do with the repurposing of Columbus? So that's what brings us here tonight. And certainly making a decision to repurpose a school is not an easy decision, very, very difficult. But we have to keep in mind that collectively as board members and as administration of the district, our priority and our purpose is what is best for our students, what is going to bring the most success to our students, and that's what we have to consider. Now, we certainly hope that when we're making decisions and taking actions that will bring success for our students, that it aligns with what also may be a priority for other entities and organizations across our community. So it starts with our 4K program being out in community sites, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, all the way to the other end of the spectrum. We work closely with post-secondary institutions like UW, Oshkosh, Fox Valley Tech, Lawrence University, and everything in between, the city, the county, certainly neighborhoods within the city. But we can never forget that our priority is the education of our students. So we have to prioritize that, and that's what administration feels we're doing tonight.
So with that, any other discussion, or does anyone want to make a motion? We do, as I said, we do have an item for consideration in front of us tonight. And the consideration is to move forward with repurposing of Columbus Elementary School and then transitioning the students currently attending Columbus to another school, likely Edison.
I just want to offer some reflections. It's been very encouraging over these last few weeks to see so many of our Columbus and Edison families really engaged in our discussions. Very clearly, they care very deeply about their students and the community. And I believe that we should be committed to working together collaboratively with not just the Columbus neighborhood, but all of our historic neighborhoods, and trying to find the path forward for a highly successful educational environment. So I feel tonight's vote isn't really the end of our work together. It's really the beginning of our work together with these communities. Yet, despite all that, despite all the great support that they provide, you look at our test scores for Columbus, they're unacceptably low. Our students are just not being successful there. Yeah, I look at a very excessively high turnover rate of our staff, so our educators and professional staff are not being successful. The proposal before us to repurpose Columbus, if executed properly, and we need to be committed to that, should give us the following benefits. Provide a better learning experience for the students currently at Columbus by placing them into a different school that already has higher success. Provide opportunities to expand the RISE program for some of our students as an alternative educational facility. It also should ensure the long-term viability of Edison by shifting more students there to help keep the enrollment at Edison at a level where we can have 2 teachers on a minimum, 2 classes per grade. And it's going to allow the staff to select more desirable positions within the district. And finally, it's going to give us a net result savings of over $1 million. So in summary, I think of all our 3 major stakeholder groups, students, it's a benefit to them, staff, it's a benefit to them, our taxpayers, it's a benefit to them. So while it's a difficult decision and perhaps in some ways an unfortunate one, I think it's the right decision. So I'll make a motion to approve the repurposing of Columbus Elementary School based on the recommendation from the administration.
I had some comments that I was going to make. I think, Ed, you covered pretty much all of those points very eloquently, so thank you for that. I view this.
Should we have a second first so
Oh,
it can
I'm
be
sorry, excuse me.
discussed? I'll second the motion, but now let's go ahead with some additional discussion.
Sure, just kind of continuing on my thought. I found the district's arguments very compelling. And I view this as an unfortunate but seemingly necessary step towards the long-term viability for the district and these students. So, but thank you for putting those comments together. I think that and the other thing is understanding that any decision that we make, unfortunately, is going to come with trade-offs, and this will obviously have an effect on a number of families in our district, and recognizing that. But I do feel that the end result is a net benefit for the district. For that reason, I'll also support this.
Any other comments or input?
Yes, I will. I'd like to take a turn. I will be voting to close Columbus, and I did say close Columbus because that is what we're doing, and I think the language does matter. I agree with the reframing that has been done to say repurpose. I agree with the intent of that because the district is going to repurpose the building, and I'm confident that it will be used to benefit our students and the community. But we are voting to close Columbus, and that is statutorily the board's responsibility to vote on that. It's also our responsibility statutorily to vote on attendance boundaries. And it is outside our purview to vote on what will happen in the Columbus building going forward. And for those reasons, we have to make these decisions separately. Like, we can't circumvent the statutory reasons why we have to make these votes separately. I think for me, the biggest thing that has come out of this that has already been echoed by other people around this table is, the strong need for continued collaboration between the district and the community that it is serving. And also I would add, like, the city. To me, that is something that I'm really seeing that we need to do better at as a community. So if we're looking at community members, the municipal government, and our district, there's a lot of misunderstanding in each of those three areas among the groups. The community members don't have the power that the school district does or that the municipal government does. So, and as somebody who used to not be in elected office, like, it's not the fault of community members when there are misunderstandings of processes. It's the fault of us as those with the resources and power, that it is our job to communicate these things and make sure that the community does feel engaged and supported. And I feel that the district and the municipal government really need to do a lot better job working together, because the success and thriving of our downtown area and our center city, that requires both of us to us being district and city, to respect each other and to want to work together to solve these challenges. And I just don't see that. And so I'm going to vote yes on closing Columbus, with the hope that these two entities, systems of power, district and city, can get their act together, and I'm including myself in that, and be better collaborators with each other and with the community.
And I would echo what Nick said, similar to what I said in the work session, that I think that community members brought to us a lot of concerns, and I commend the administration for addressing those concerns.
but I also feel that there are some community members who have lost trust in our process and in just how we've made this decision. And for many, it felt like a very short timeline. It was at a busy time of the year. Some felt that our listening sessions were more about them listening to the proposals than us listening to them. While I would also state that I think the district did learn a lot in the listening sessions. And so that is good, but also we missed an opportunity for a deeper discussion about how this change will result in change in our community. And so moving forward, if nothing else, I hope that we will do a better job, because I'm looking at myself and saying, am I part of the problem? Did I not ask enough questions? Did I not dig deeper? And so that is important, I think, for all of us to do moving forward. And we talked about, you know, the possibility of decline in other schools in our community. And I really do hope that we make it a priority to encourage our community to participate, other systems, the city, other organizations that do support schools. And as many people have pointed out, the schools have been charged with more than just academics. And what I see here is that we're looking at much of the data we used was academic based, but we are charged with, you know, mental health, physical health, clothing, feeding, so many things. And so unless we involve the whole community, I feel like we'll be back here in a short time looking at other schools. So again, I really do hope that as a board that we will make a commitment to move forward with the community and really do an overall job of getting everybody's voice and then seeing where that leads.
I'll just briefly also share that I understand challenging decisions have to be made, you know, with a lot of frequency. And this is a very significant and hopefully not frequent, you know, very challenging decision. I feel like I'm just especially disappointed in how we ended up in this place where it feels like we are making such a big decision in a very urgent and rushed way, especially as it relates to those that are impacted. I don't feel like we did our best to build trust through the challenging situation. I think we, you know, ended up feeling, you know, like we were trying to do a lot in too little of time to make it feel meaningful. Despite, you know, many of the data points that, you know, are the rationale for the decision being something that has, you know, it wasn't like we just now learned of any of those. We've, you know, been aware of those. And I think we've been sending mixed messages over the last couple of years as it relates to Columbus, with the conversation about that being a possibility to then not doing it and then continuing to say we're making commitments, you know, as we just built a new playground there in partnership with the community, you know, said we were going to move forward and renovating for STEM as part of the referendum and so forth, without even, you know, acknowledging any of the lingering pieces in the background still being present, and then honestly flinging it on a community right before the holidays and then needing to make a decision immediately thereafter. And I just really hope that, similar to what Chris shared, that we are learning from this and trying to take a better approach moving forward with such significant decisions that really do impact a lot of people's lives in incredibly significant ways. I think that very few people that gave us feedback, you know, were asking for status quo to be all that happened. But I do feel like it, from what I've heard from many of them, it doesn't feel like there was really true interest in getting any information or having a conversation. The decision was largely made and felt inevitable. And I just worry about what that means for our systems if we make more people feel that way, that go to our schools, that send their kids to our schools, that work in our schools, or that pay taxes in our community in hopes that we're providing an excellent institution that makes people want to be here. So I just feel like this is a important time to at least share that, no matter what decision is made tonight.
Can I just add to that, you know, that building trust moving forward is going to be so important, because I do believe that we have there are a lot of people who have lost trust, and some people stated it at least one of the listening sessions. So I think we have a big job going forward to ensure that all stakeholders feel heard and valued in any of our processes.
Any other comments or input? Okay, seeing none, then we do have a motion and a second, so I'll ask for a roll call.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Nay.
James Bacon,
Nay.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Ed Ruffalo,
Aye.
and Kay Eger.
Aye. Okay, next we will move on, attendance boundary changes. Mr. Hartjes.
So as we had talked about, this would be the second decision that is a board decision. And it is our hope that it could be made at the next meeting in 2 weeks. We have provided this information in 4 options, and those 4 options, the first one would combine the current Columbus attendance area with the Edison attendance area. And there are positives and there are concerns to that. The positives related to geographic proximity, enrollment capacity of Edison. There's neighborhood integrity. We talked about the fact that these 2 boundaries combined still would be the 6th smallest attendance area in our district. Growth and future development. We've talked to the city about any growth or future development. Obviously, there is some possible apartment structures being built. In this area, we don't know if it's going to bring students, but again, we do have capacity at Edison. And then demographics. Edison is actually below the district average in students with who qualify for free or reduced meals. They are below the district average in other demographic areas. When Columbus students were to come over, they would be close to the district average in all of those demographic areas. The concerns are simply that we do have students that would live closer to Dunlap than they would to Edison, but that'll come up in another option. And then accessibility is a concern. And so we already have students that attend Edison that do have to cross Meade, Law, and Drew. And so some concerns that were brought up around Columbus students is how do they safely cross those 3 streets as well? And so we're already doing that with Columbus students. The city has provided crossing guards at 2 of those crossings, at Meade and at Law Street, but not at Drew. So that is a concern area that we have. But that is the first option. The second option, very similar to the first one, in that it combines Columbus and Edison attendance areas, but then it would also bring into Edison, there's a small area that is south of Wisconsin Avenue that currently attends Franklin. And so this is something that the district has looked at for many years and wondered why it has been. Most likely it's because Columbus and Edison did not have capacity at one time. And so those students were brought across Wisconsin Avenue. So we try to not have students cross, obviously, Wisconsin Avenue, Northland, and then the streets that run north and south, Richmond being the main one that we try to stay away from. So we think that the positives here are that it would be a much safer walk or bike to school for students. In proximity, they are closer to Edison than they are currently to Franklin. There are currently 10 students that live in this area that attend Franklin. So the only concern we have is that it would decrease Franklin's enrollment by 10 students approximately. And these students may decide to continue at Franklin. Obviously, with school of choice, they can do that. But we do think for families, this is a safer option to have them attend Edison. Option 3 is the same as option 2, but it would take an area that has been assigned to Dunlap for almost 30 years. And that is the area that is bordered by Richmond Street on the west, Division Street on the east, and I believe it is Packard on the north. And so that area has attended Dunlap and then Wilson and then West High School. And so the third option would have that area also go to Edison. And so the positives, again, accessibility, not having students cross Richmond. Now they have, like we said, for the last almost 30 years. But there's some neighborhood integrity that we would improve. The central historic neighborhood does come into that area. So if we were to have that area go to Edison, it would include all of the historic central neighborhood. And again, enrollment capacity is not an issue. We aren't concerned about growth or future developments, and the demographics are roughly the same then across that area. The concerns that we have is it would be a change in feeder patterns. And so the students, like I said, currently in that area do attend Dunlap, Wilson, West, significantly closer in terms of proximity to Dunlap, Wilson, and West High School. The Edison attendance area goes to Kaleidoscope and North High School. And so this would be assigning students to North High School and Kaleidoscope. Now, there are a lot of students in this area, even in the current Columbus area and Franklin, that will go to Kaleidoscope for middle school, but then open enroll to West for high school because it is much closer than going to North. So again, in our decision here, we do not have any busing. None of these areas include busing for regular education students. And because of school of choice, and we have open enrollment across our district, students and families can choose to go to any school that they would like. And then, like I said, the geographic proximity, it is closer to the West Cluster schools. And then option 4 would have us taking option 2. So it would be the inclusion of most of Columbus. It would include the area of Franklin that is south of Wisconsin Avenue, but it would take the top left-hand rectangle of the current Columbus attendance area and have that go across Richmond to Dunlap. So you'll see that this one has some positives in terms of proximity to those schools. Enrollment capacity is not a concern. Demographics is not a concern, and growth future development is not a concern. We do have concerns about accessibility. We would ask more students to cross Richmond Street. One of the things that we heard from families during the Columbus, actually PTO meeting, is that we have to think about friendships that develop and out of school time. So it's not just that we talked about safely getting kids across Richmond Street with possibly, whether it's a crossing guard working with the city, or perhaps we would use a walking school bus approach with a para, but that doesn't help families and children who maybe want to go to a friend's house across Richmond Street outside of the school day, and that be weekend, summer, and in the evening. And so, you know, to have those students go over to Dunlap and develop friendships with kids on the other side of Richmond could be a burden for those families. So accessibility is a concern. Feeder patterns, again, this does change. That area currently does go to Kaleidoscope and then to North High School. And then neighborhood integrity is, this actually harms the neighborhood integrity because part of that area, actually, that entire rectangle is part of the central historic neighborhood. So those are the 4 options. We've put together what we believe are the positives and the concerns for each of the 4 options. So want to open it up for any discussion here, and Dr. Bono is with me to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm sorry, Greg, can you clarify which rectangle in option 4, is it a green rectangle or a red, which rectangle is part of the historic central neighborhood?
It's the rectangle that is north of Atlantic. I can see it better on this map. So north of Atlantic, yes, that's currently part of Columbus attendance area. And in this option, it would go to over to Dunlap.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
I'll also just quickly note that the boundaries of that neighborhood go down to Packard, which is already being bisected in the current map as well. And that the downtown neighborhood, which we haven't mentioned, is another neighborhood that is, I believe, I could look at the map again, but I believe what is south of there, but still above College, and goes continuing over to the east, like towards Edison. So without the visual, okay, are you pulling them up there?
Yeah.
Thank you. That would, I think, help,
I
but
didn't want to confuse you.
no, it's okay. I guess to summarize my point though, in option 4, the green part that is on the east of Richmond, there's 2 neighborhoods that are being cut off in the attendance boundary by using division, I guess is my point.
Does anyone know, maybe you do, James, whether option 2 or option 3 has the best integrity for that central historic neighborhood? 'Cause I know there's significant overlap.
Yeah, so Packard is the southern boundary and Richmond is the western boundary for the historic central neighborhood. So option 3 has more integrity there. And I believe that the downtown neighborhood, that would also be true for. Their boundaries are a little bit more unique. I'll try to look them up in a second again and confirm that though. And it might be worth noting that part of the historic central neighborhood is also, I believe, in that Dunlap Square, but a very little part. Yeah, I mean, I guess if I look at neighborhood integrity, I think option 3 seems like the best option. It also limits kids crossing our 2 busiest arteries, which are Wisconsin and Richmond. Even if it's a slightly longer, journey to get to Edison, it's a more walkable, bikeable And I think even often, to be honest, many people that transport their kids around this area would prefer not to cross Wisconsin and Richmond if they can avoid it when they're trying to just go across in the mornings, so. My question though, actually on that is, do we know if we have heard specifically from anyone in the Dunlap affected area or the Richmond, right? Now I'm saying so many school names. I think I'm Franklin. Thank you. I knew something was wrong there. The Franklin area in the listening sessions or otherwise.
We did inform Franklin of this, but we did not have any representation or any sort of communication.
Is there any sense from the principals of those schools?
I think because of school of choice and since they're already enrolled there, they can stay there. We probably would not see an impact from that area for a period of time until we have new families coming through. So we think that that may be why we're not hearing, because we've been very clear that they would be able to still finish out at Franklin.
I can say that a previous Franklin principal was very actively asking the district to change that Franklin portion. That principal felt that attendance was a struggle for many families that lived in that area. If the parent couldn't drive them to school, having, an elementary student try to cross Wisconsin Avenue. So, I think the current principal probably feels the same way, but a little concerned about enrollment as well. As that is a school that at like 270 students is, getting to that point where we're concerned, although their enrollment has increased the last 2 years. So they've actually come out of the pandemic and done well. So anyway, that is the Franklin situation. The Dunlap principal, in talking to him about both this area and the other area that we're looking at for Dunlap, feels that parents are driving for the most part across Wisconsin Avenue or across Richmond. Again, that doesn't help kids developing friendships on the other side of Richmond.
Yeah, I guess I would say that option 3 was always my favorite of the options, just for, the continuity within Wisconsin and Richmond. For the concerns, I appreciate James's comment about geographic proximity not being, or that accessibility being potentially a stronger benefit than geographic proximity, because that was a question that I definitely had. And then with the concern on the feeder patterns, would it be accurate to say that the school of choice really kind of renders that not really as much of an issue, especially for the students that currently reside there, right? Like Ann said, like nothing needs to change for any of those students.
Right. Again, the only thing we worry about, and this really plays out differently for middle school students as they develop friendships, is, students are all going together at elementary school at Edison, and then maybe going to Kaleidoscope together and then deciding to go to different high schools. Obviously, Einstein has that right now, and kids do that all the time across our district. But really, that's probably the only concern with feeder patterns, is that, students may have to at some point decide, to go to a school that maybe their friendships aren't strong there.
But from a capacity perspective, or from other concerns that the district might have, they're not really concerned about those students going to any particular school.
That's correct.
Because we haven't talked about like capacity at the high schools, and in this case, west or north, but I mean, that would be the only time open enrollment then would matter. In this case, obviously, if either school hits capacity, then kids would not have the choice to open enroll. And I guess you could argue maybe Wilson and Kaleidoscope. So how close are they to capacity? And do we have any concern with the development areas that we've identified, both Center City and on the north and or west side of our boundaries, that there's concern about those schools reaching capacity?
We do have some concerns about North and Einstein. And it's a combination of growth and school of choice within our district. that raises our concerns. So as far as middle school, Kaleidoscope has room. In fact, Kaleidoscope is probably 100 students under capacity. So Kaleidoscope has room. Wilson's real close to capacity, but when we project out their early elementary grades of their 4 feeder schools, they're actually going to see Wilson decline in enrollment based on the students that currently attend their 4 feeder elementary schools. So really no concerns at the middle school at all around open enrollment between Kaleidoscope and Wilson. At high schools, West has space, North is over capacity. But with that being said, it's a lot easier to be over capacity at high schools because you have a lot of flexibility with how you run classes, when you run classes. Block scheduling can help before you can run 0 hours and 9th hours. So there's just a lot less concerns around overcapacity at high school.
Yeah, and I mean, because the main thing as it relates to the decision here, then if I'm hearing you correctly, is if we add this small chunk and rezone it from west to north, in the early grades, it has little impact, but capacity could potentially be an issue at north, but given the small amount of what we're rezoning and the nature of overcapacity to high school seems unlikely, especially if what we're worried about here is this section that's being rezoned to north, where it's the concern, maybe also wanting to choose west, which we are not concerned about. So seems like it's of no concern at this moment for the foreseeable future. Okay, thank you.
So really like aspects of option 3 in that our students don't have to cross Wisconsin or Richmond. That's great. I had an opportunity to actually walk from Summer Street, which is probably the furthest, to Edison. Now, I'm not the fastest walker in the city of Appleton. That took me about 20 minutes. I assume that's reasonable for our students to walk that far. I will say, and you kind of pointed this out, is to do that, I think Oneida, Law, and Meade, they're going to need some assistance crossing those streets. And it sounds like we already have 2 of those, 3 at Oneida and at, not at, do we have any?
3 of the 4 actually.
Oh, 3 of the 4. It's just not.
Drew. Right.
Drew isn't that bad. I guess like we could go either way, but certainly those other 3, Law, Meade, and Oneida are quite busy. You want something there.
Right. And they currently have crossing
Okay,
guards.
perfect. Thank you.
I'll just throw out there, Ed, that you might be faster than the average kindergartner, though. As I actually live near where you walked from and sent my kid to Edison for 4K actually, and we would bike or drive most of the time, knowing the distance with little legs. But yes, it is walkable, especially if you have places at those crossing spots.
And I guess before making a decision, I would really be interested in, again, the community perspective on some of these choices. And so I'm wondering if we thought about what that might be, or, moving forward, how we could get community input.
We needed to wait pending the decision tonight, but with that, we will be reaching out to all of these families in these communities to let them know of the decision that the board made tonight about the repurposing of Columbus. But then we also will be informing them of this decision at the next board meeting, so and to provide that opportunity to provide feedback.
And that's 2 weeks from tonight, right? That board meeting. Do we think that's enough time to give community members their voice?
When you look at, if you go back to option 2, you're going to see that families currently are choosing to go to a lot of different schools. So really, I think most families are going to say there's really very little difference between what you're asking here in terms of changing. But again, if we're just worried about that rectangle, we could push this decision further out. If we know that for sure we're going to combine Columbus and Edison, and we're not sure about the Franklin portion or the Dunlap portion, that helps us with our enrollment projections. So that this is about enrollment projections. And so if we need to take more time to get more input, we certainly can from those two areas, knowing that there's 8 students in one area and 10 in the other. And we don't think either of those areas are going to see a lot of kids choose to leave their school. Like, we don't think a student who's been at Dunlap from kindergarten, probably 4K through 3rd grade, is maybe now going to come over to Edison for 4th and 5th. So we're not that concerned about those two areas and how many students that we would, you know, include at Edison. So really it's, if there's kind of a consensus here that you think that the Columbus area and the Edison area makes sense, that's where the bulk of the kids are, obviously, that we're dealing with.
I would say from our original communication, we shared with the Franklin families about the possibility of that area being considered, as well as the piece on option 4 with that northern part above. We did share with the Columbus families that we were considering that to be either Dunlap or Edison. And at the Columbus meeting, that was actually a parent or two were there from that area that spoke to that. But the one we have not talked to, because we hadn't really considered, is that area south of Atlantic, switching that from Dunlap to Edison. So I would say that would need to be a priority for communication, to reach out to those families to let them know, because that has not been shared as of today, but with everything else, it was put forward originally.
I was thinking about one community, at least one, but there might have been others and some people that I spoke with. If they don't have children in school now, they may not know that this is happening. And so I don't know how that communication gets out to families who are living in these areas if they don't have children here. So I don't know if anybody has any suggestions there.
Well, certainly we can work with the neighborhood groups that are there. They have a great network already, and would love to partner with them to get that out. Certainly, we do have some record of if they're in early childhood or 4K. Ray has been very helpful and has screened some of them out of some of our accounts. So what information we have, and then partnering with community agencies that may have different resources to reach them, would be something we can do.
We also use social media, obviously, to communicate when we have meetings. So even though these families that currently attend our schools, we can send direct emails. We can also use social media. And hopefully that gets picked up maybe in the neighborhoods.
So, Nan, for the parents who did express, I'm sorry, excuse me, was it an option 4? The parents that were up in option 4, or was it, which green square are you talking about?
The option 4 with that upper, the
North
north of Atlantic, yeah, right where the cursor is. I know you can't see it.
No, okay.
But that section right there, our original proposal and our original communication was that we were considering that possibly for Dunlap to mirror what was south of there. And it's through the discussions that we had at the Columbus PTO meeting, as well as the Columbus listening session, where there were concerns about that, as Superintendent Hart just indicated, related to not being able to cross on non-school hours. And so that's because of that feedback, then additional options came forward for our consideration.
Thank you.
I just have one other question. So for families that are in those areas that we would potentially being switched from one district to another, or from one attendance area to another, is there like additional paperwork that they need to file, or if they're already enrolled there, there's no other steps for them to take? Like how much action is going to be required from those families to go to the school that they want to attend?
We would ask them just to complete school of choice paperwork. It just helps us to track. And so it's kind of the same thing we did with Huntley and Sandy Slope, even though, you know, some kids are currently at Huntley and are just continuing at Huntley, even though they're in Sandy Slope. We're just asking them to complete the one simple piece of paperwork so that we have record.
That makes the communication even more.
I would say, once enrolled, always enrolled. They can stay. And so this will be more of a formality just because we're trying to, work on Edison enrollments, but it's very limited. Only if they're choosing to leave a school and go to a different, then we do have them fill out some paperwork.
So just to clarify on that, if I was going to enroll my student, let's say I'm a first grade student, parent of a first grade student at one of the schools that's boundaries changing, I fill the paperwork out one time, or do I fill it out every year to open enroll to the school to?
Once you are enrolled in that school, it's only a one time.
Okay.
That you have to fill out the paperwork.
I thought that's what I understood. I just
Yeah,
wanted to make sure I was
The
understanding.
address can keep changing if you're moving, but you just have to do it that original time.
Okay.
Now, out of district, that gets a little bit different, but within the district, as long as you're enrolled at that school, you can stay.
Okay, any other discussion or questions? Board members have enough information, or
It sounds like it was potentially not coming back at the next meeting then?
that's what I'm-
That is really up to, board members. If you don't think that you're going to be ready to make a decision on the 27th, again, we can push that out a little bit. We can go maybe until the first meeting in February. That would give us a month because the numbers are so small. It's not really going to impact our enrollment projections. That's what is pushing our timelines for everything else. So we can wait if the board would like it.
Can we just review what additional information are people requesting, or what additional, so that if we want to push it off, what is it that we are looking for?
I'd say maybe whether or not we push it off. I think maybe this map up here is a good illustration of like maybe, I know we talked about the red square a lot with Sandy Slope, so make a colored square around them or call them zone 1, zone 2 for any of the areas impacted. And I think that'd help us like have a conversation, make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And I would just be interested in knowing like what have we heard from people that are in any of the different zones like already and over the time between now and when we make the decision, whether it's in 2 weeks or not. I think knowing if we feel like we have enough input about all the zones impacted here, then I think that's the main thing I'm looking for at this point to officially vote. And I want to just double clarify, like, I think we have heard a lot from people in these zones. I think we probably still have, especially a few particular zones, like the non-Columbus zones impacted to make sure we're hearing from, but that is personally what I think would be helpful to make a vote. And whether we can achieve that in 2 weeks or not, I think is maybe not my choice because I'm not the one doing that collection, but.
I believe that if community feedback is solicited and received, and I believe it will be within the 2-week time frame, I should be prepared to vote in 2 weeks.
Can we I just want to make sure that administration is, or maybe I'm just not clear. And so to reach out to the students, the families that live in these neighborhoods, or there's also some talk about just people that live in the neighborhoods, but they may not have kids in school. What is the expectation?
That would be ideal, but I'm hearing that that may not be possible with the information that we have as a school district. Is that accurate?
We can reach out to anyone that we have certainly in our rosters, which would include younger students, birth to 5. We have a lot of a very strong birth to 5 program. So we do have connections with families in that manner. But I do feel that through social media, through working with the neighborhood associations in those areas, if they're willing to allow us to utilize their network, their communication network, we should be able to, share the information that we're sharing with the families we know of in those areas with the greater public. And we can certainly work with Kylie Harwell to come up with, just like we did with the QR code and the link to provide us their input.
So it'd be open-ended. Can you just tell me, I mean, we have 4 options. Were you going to share 4? I guess, what would you do? Or do you need to think about it?
I think that it's going to be critical to have the maps because I think that is helpful to understand what the options are in addition to the descriptions that we have. I think that is what was done with Sandy Slope and with Huntley. And so that's something that we can mirror.
Would there be any value in having board members tonight say no to one or more of the options to make it a little easier for us going forward to gather input? If you could, if the board said this one is absolutely not interested in this, that may make it a little easier for us to collect feedback from families.
Agree wholeheartedly if that's possible.
I can answer that right away. Greg. The ones that are interesting to me are 2 and 3. I don't like 1 because I'd like to see the students not have to cross Wisconsin to the north. And I don't like 4 because I don't want to see them cross Richmond to the west. That's just my opinion. If you're going to make it simpler for the community, I think 2 and 3 would be the ones I would focus on.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah, for sure. 4 does not make a lot of sense. And as long as we feel that with 1, if people are comfortable that right now it's 2 and 3 both have the Franklin Square in the Columbus area. So that would basically be a none. So really then it's really following up with the Green Square.
Yeah, I think we would provide the feedback, or we would solicit the feedback in a way that also allows people to provide opinions. Like if somebody has a really strong opinion about the Franklin section, like they should be able to provide that input, even if like maybe we'll get some input that really blows us away. I don't know. But by limiting the options, but allowing for some open input rather than it just being a binary choice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think option 4 seems to be the one that we should discard. I worry if we only do options 2 and 3, we're sending a message to anyone that lives in that square that the decision's over, so sorry. And I don't want to send that message, even if that seems right now to everyone in the room like the likely path forward. I just don't want to, because the people that are going to be giving feedback on this may or may not have heard anything about any of this until then. And I think if you see 2 options and both of them have a change in them that is the same, it implies that decision's made. We only want feedback on the rest, even if you don't intend that to be true.
So then that would be 1, 2, and 3. Just eliminate 4.
You made it 25% easier. Okay with that.
Okay, so you'll solicit feedback. Board will receive the feedback. Somehow.
Right, we'll provide the feedback that we get in a summarized form. And, try to do that by early next week. And President Hager, you usually set the agenda, so we can discuss if the agenda, if we want this on the agenda for the next meeting. And again, we can put it on the agenda, and if we get to the meeting in 2 weeks and you aren't comfortable, or 1 or more of you are not comfortable, you can take it off the agenda. I think that's what we had planned to do previously with the Sandy Slope Huntley decision. Ultimately, everybody was comfortable. You went ahead and made that decision, but we certainly can add it to the agenda, and if it needs to come off at that time, that's fine.
Just the logistics, and maybe it'd be more that when we get to that item on the agenda, we say to versus, I think we can pull anything that's just, if anyone has a concern, we can pull things off the consent agenda, but otherwise, when we get, we can still talk about it, you know, then we could have that discussion, but if people don't want to vote, then it could be, we could just move it to the next or something. Just a logistics
Right, it's
How we
like we
would handle
table it if we don't want to move it forward, correct?
at this point.
Yeah, and that way we can still have the conversation and make a decision if we want to table when presuming we have some discussion during the actual meeting. I think that'd be helpful. So anyway, thank you.
Just one question that I have because Sandy Slope came up. With Sandy Slope, we did offer an in-person option. Do we feel the need for that to get feedback, or do we feel that written communication or perhaps communication with the board directly is enough?
I think given the short timeline, I think potentially the more possible ways people on a short timeline could provide feedback would be nice. So if it's possible to have an in-person meeting of some kind, if it's possible to fill out a form, or maybe even we give an option, even if it's last, to email the board email or something, if that's what they're most comfortable with. Because I know some people feel more comfortable in one, like open form communication, and some people feel comfortable in maybe more of a form response. You know, I think people feel differently about like the anonymity of either option sometimes too. So
I think we can certainly hold an in-person. We could, that would not be a problem. A little bit of scheduling issue next week with the state school board convention. But we certainly can figure out between Dr. Buno and I who can be at a meeting together, input. But much similar to, you know, the events that we had where we held the meeting, but we invited to listening sessions. You could come from any of the schools. And so we had Dunlap families that came to the Edison meeting. We had Edison folks that came to Columbus. We can do one meeting, invite anybody who wants to share input.
I don't mean to create more work, but I do want to, just want to honor people who might have an opinion, and that might be the best way of expressing it.
Okay, if there's nothing else on this topic, then takes us to the end of our agenda. We do have to point out that next week is Wisconsin State Education Convention. There are several of us signed up to attend. And then the next board meeting will be Monday, January 27th, 6 p.m. So, all right, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Good night.